Coogee Rap, you know, Scarface, anything that was considered at that time MC8 negative. I'm listening to Poor Righteous Teachers, you know, Kara S1, King's
Right.
Son, Bob Paul Quest. Even though I was listening to like Coogee Rap and different stuff like that, but I was more into the conscious part, wearing African medallions, stuff like that. So it was already this brewing of Israel in my mind, but I wasn't there yet, so to say. So one day, I'm downtown Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I went to go pick up some Saucony's. I never forget it. I went to go pick up some Saucony sneakers, and I seen these guys on the street corner, and they had turbans on, these staff, 12 tribes of Israel chart, etc., etc. Like, man, who are these noodles? This is the mind state that I'm on. So I'm listening to them saying we the original Israelites, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that portion I agree with because of what I seen in my great grandmother's home. But I didn't see the militancy of it. And, I never been to an actual Israelite school, so to say, where you actually seeing the culture. So, like anybody else, I was really shaming myself, but I was calling myself shaming them, hollering at them, screaming at them. So one of my arguments was, yeah, them did eat an apple, and it's funny that even on the back of the screen of this presentation, we see an anthropomorphical image of Adam Wakawa, or Adam and what they call the Eve story, and there's an apple there. And I'm telling this guy, like, yeah, Adam did eat an apple, Eve did eat an apple. And the Israelite brothers were like, okay, well, show me in the Bible. I said, I'll be back next week and I'll show you. And the brother
Right.
said, if you can't show me that Adam and Eve ate an apple, you gotta take, because at this time I'm wearing a kufi. My father's side, they Muslim. My mother's side, they Aboriginal Indians slash Hebrew Pentecostals. So I'm going through this tug of war trying to find out who I am. But the brother said, if you can't find this apple, you come up to the school. I said, okay. So I go home. I'm looking all over for this apple, brother Hilltop. I'm looking all over the scripture for this apple. I don't find it. So I go back that following Friday, and I know that there's no apple there mentioned. So I play deceptively where the word fruit at. I'm like, see, there it is right there. There it is. And the brother like, brother, where does it say apple at? And he caught me. So I wind up visiting their school. At the time, this was known as UPK, Universal
Oh,
Practical Knowledge. I never was a member. This is before you got ISUPK. And that same, yeah, this is where ISUPK comes from.
the original.
ISUPK was
The
found,
original. You
yeah,
talking about the original?
the original school is known as Universal Practical Knowledge. That came out in
Okay.
1969, but I was never a part of that school. I just went to visit. I was already affiliated with an Israelite church, so to say, through my great grandmother. You know what I'm saying? And that same day that I said that there was an apple, but it wasn't there, I met a man by the name of Tayyam ben Yisrael. And Tayyam ben Yisrael also asked me to come to his school. So I wound up going to his school too that same day that I went to go visit UPK. half the day I spent with UPK, and they used to be up on Ogons Avenue up in Western Plain in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Then I wound up going to North Philly to a school which later became known as Kifraim, that was founded by a man named Prince Kazaridar ben Yisrael, which was Tayyam ben Israel's father. So when I went to that school, I started filling that school immediately, and they were Torah only. So I started going to that school, and ever since I've been in that school until I evolved and wound up connecting with the Kingdom of Yah, which was stationed in Dimona, Israel, northeastern Africa, led by the late Adonenu Rabbeinu, also known as Ben Ami. I became a direct understudy of the late Prince Asiel, who was second in command with the late Ben Ami. The third in command was Prince Dr. Shaliach ben Yahuda, who founded the School of the Prophets in Dimona, Israel, northeastern Africa. So I became direct understudies of him, other prominent scholars such as Zaquin Ishkael ben Yisrael Agabit Hetzabat, Sar Zaquin Rabah ben Yisrael, that found Torah, Moriel ben Yisrael, that found Beit Sedate, who came out of Temple Bethel. My Hebrew linguistic teacher was Rabbi Cole Windsor, who's Professor Rudolph R. Windsor's brother, who wrote the book From Babylon to Timbuktu. So, I became an understudy of some of the most major prominent Israelite teachers in the world. When you start talking about people like the late Zaquin Ishkael ben Israel, he was a direct understudy of Zaquin Ariel ben Israel, who was a direct understudy of Rabbi Whitworth A. Matthews, who in turn was a direct understudy of Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, who was the musical director and quiet as is kept second in command of the UNIA movement under the late Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And then you got others being under Ben Ami. He was a direct understudy of Zaquin Eliyahu Bowie, who in turn, Elder Yahu Bowie and them go back to people such as Prophet F.S. Cherry or Prophet Frank S. Cherry and Prophet William S. Crawley, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a pedigree of teachers that I came from out of. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this, and I know the question may seem, the answer long-winded, but these things have to be put out there so our people will have a record. Deuteronomy or Devarim chapter 32, verse 7 tell us, go to our fathers when we want that they may lead us. Go to our elders, our Zakwanim, that they may tell us. So what's going on right now, that there are many Israelites in the Israelite community that's learning on social media. And because of that, they start to develop different dogmas in their mind, and they put this information out on social media, and it confuses the masses. Imagine, my Lord, the monk or the Shaolin monk without the abbot. That's what's going on right now. You have a bunch of monks without abbots in the community. And because of that, it has caused a lot of confusion within the Israelite community. But yes, my pedigree comes from out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a Torah-centered Hebrew Israelite, sovereign national. I want to make that clear, versus being a Hebrew Israelite. So I want to distinguish Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism versus just being a Hebrew Israelite. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay. Hey, all right. So they're gonna lead to my next one. You know what I'm saying? Shout out and shalom to brother Ben Weed behind them bars, man. And when you said sovereignness, I know that just made him excited, because this goes to the next question. He's a sovereign. He's a Hebrew Israelite sovereign, but he's been behind the walls for a while. But the brother is very knowledgeable. Do you believe in the whole sovereignness and using 33rd degree masonry, Freemasonry, into the Bible, because certain Hebrew Israelites believe that that the Freemasonry came, that every tribe had their own lodge. That, you know what I'm saying, Judah had his own lodge, Manasseh and Gad, and so forth and so forth. And they believe in using not really modern day Freemasonry, because they know that that is a bunch of wickedness up in their lodges that they got nowadays. But do you believe in using the Freemason knowledge and the sovereign knowledge, of course, with the Hebrew teachings?
That's a great and excellent question that you imposing out there. So let's make it clear so everybody know. No, I'm not a Freemason. So everybody know I'm putting that out there right now. But am I a DAP? Yes, I'm a DAP, but I'm not a Freemason. So I'm gonna explain that as we proceed in the presentation. Now, is Freemasonry, is the foundation and the principles come from out of the biblical context? Absolutely. Absolutely. When we understand the compass and the square, and even when you go into the supreme mathematics or the 120 lessons of the nation of gods and earth, they talk about truth is in the square. Where is truth? The truth is Torah Constitution. Now, what I'm doing is I'm entwining sovereignty with your question. Now, you have what is called the sovereign citizenship movement, and you see that down south with a bunch of, men that a lot of them are ex-militant, and we've seen this in a book known as Cracking the Code. I know y'all heard these things before.
Yeah.
And later it evolved into Redemption Manual. And a lot of us, we took UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, and we started to get with our non-negotiable bill of exchanges, the chargeback form with your EIN number, which is your social security without the dashes. And we started to equate these ideas to ourselves. And I'm saying by doing this, we went in error, not understanding that the Torah itself is the Constitution. Israel is the body politic. So when we understand Torah within the principle, within each dispensation, that is what causes us to be sovereign. Now, the question, was there a lodge in each of the 12 tribes? I'll say this. I won't use the term lodge, because remember, there is a difference of the Hebraic cosmological and anthropological understanding of that science versus modern day, because even words are thought that materializes in the physical matter. So what I'm going to say is, did Israel as a whole have certain sacred sciences of Torah thought? Yes. And were there charges within each of these tribes that caused us to be one body politic, as in Voltron? Sure. Because before we had Nabim or prophets, we had seers. Y'all know that, remember? When you go into the book of Joshua, it tells you that there was a transition from the seership to the prophetship, right? And there was a time even before that when we start talking antediluvian. Now we're talking a time where we understood all of us as being Elohim embodied in human form. So is there truth in these said mysteries of Jerusalem adaptation, which later became Freemasonry? Sure, there's truth. Because when you look at the original understanding of Freemasonry, they taught that there will be a star from the east that will rise from the west, right? And we know that star is Israel. And then when we look at the initiation of Haim Mabith, I'm not going to say too much, but I'm just going to say this. We see the three ruffians. We see the three ruffians knock Hyman Mabiff on the head at high noon, bury Hyman Mabiff in the shallow grave near the western gate of quote unquote Solomon's temple. So now when we look at it as it applies to who is Hyman Mabiff today, metaphorically speaking, that would be the nation of Israel, the so-called black Negroes who were knocked in the head at high noon with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, right? Or in its order, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right? Buried in the shallow grave, buried in the philosophies of the other nations, buried at the Western Gate in the Western Hemisphere. Are y'all with me? So there is symbolism that define who Israel is in Freemasonry. But modern day Freemasonry is wicked because you gotta remember, Freemasonry got infiltrated by the Illuminati. The original intent was righteous, but as it developed, it became something else. So I don't want to be one that don't give Freemasonry a fair chance as it comes to what happened to Freemasonry. It became corrupted through the Illuminati infiltrating Freemasonry and destroying it. That's a fact.
And basically, you said the same thing that I know you watched the brother Fred Jackson, brother Israel, and the brother Ben Naweed that's in the chat say, you know what I'm saying? They not Freemason. They said basically the same thing you say, you know, they understand it's a part of it, but it's been infiltrated by Illuminati and wicked people that's doing pedophilia, child sex trafficking, and so forth and so forth. You know what I'm saying? Allegedly or whatever. So I got two more questions. And then I'm gonna pass it to Brother Donya Who. The next question is: you talk about Torah, you know, Torah, and Torah is our base foundation. Do you believe in any books in the New Testament or any books outside of the Old Testament at all?
That's a good question. I'm a historian. I'm also a social anthropologist. And I got my degrees out of the School of the Prophets Institute in Dimona, Israel. There's truth to everything. Ben Ami said something clear. He said, truth has the inherent power to produce the promised effect. So truth is verifiable. I'm strictly Torah owned. I'm Torah based. I don't subscribe to the New Testament. But what I do subscribe to is the truth that's within it. Now, what do I mean by that? We can see a world collision, so to say, within the writings of the Synoptic Gospels and the epistles of Paul. We can, those that have the eye as a historian, we can see it, right? But I want to put a face on this man, which in my research, he's known as Moreh Yeshua Bar Yosef, who people call Jesus Christ, okay? My information doesn't come by the way of the New Testament that the man existed. Yes, he existed, but I don't acknowledge that he was prophesied in the Tanakh. And I'll get into that as we develop. But was he a historical man? He was. Now, my information comes from a scroll known as the Scroll of Saint Isa. You can find this in the Tibetan monasteries amongst the Tibetan monks. The 17 missing year history of Moreh Yeshua Bar Yosef, we can clearly find this in many manuscripts in the Indian subcontinent. along with, you know, all the way to Tibet, we see the travels of this man. When you look at the verbiage, the language of Yeshua in the New Testament, it's Buddhic, it's pure Buddhism. If we really understand the coming of the kingdom of heaven, et cetera, when we look at the language and then we start getting historical and seeing that the Essenes had a connection with Buddhism in the Far East, we can see it crystal clear. We even see in the 29th chapter, the 12th verse of Isaiah, I believe, where it speaks about that we were migrated as far as Shanim. Shanim, right, is an ancient word for China. You also go into Bereshit, or the 10th chapter, you see the Sinites. The Sinites are descendants of Ham. And the founding fathers and mothers of ancient China, of the Sinites, were in fact the Hamites. Okay? And we see that we migrated into these regions. And we can prove historically that the founder of Buddhism, right, have an Israelite connection with the northern kingdom of Israel. And we can pull this up live in front of everybody, and we can show historical records that we migrated into these regions by the way of the Silk Road. And we know that during the time of Mori Yeshua Bar Yosef's ministry, that the Silk Road was known by the way of the Roman Empire. It was known even amongst the Greeks and all that. This was known. So we can see that there was a migrational pattern of the Israelites going into the Far East. We know definitely Africa, but since we're speaking of Mori Yeshua Bar Yosef, I'm talking about his travels, and there are records. And I want you to write this down, brothers and sisters. Write down the scroll of Saint Isa. The manuscript is 1,400 years old. Maybe a little bit older, maybe 1,500, but it talks about the travels of Mori Yeshua Bar Yosef from Jerusalem to the Indus Valley, as far as Tibet, China, Japan, and then he goes back to what we know as Jerusalem at the age of 33, and here we go with 33. Are we talking Masonic? No, I'm just joking, y'all. I had to throw that out there. But even within the joke, there's truth to the joke, right? So he goes there and then he becomes assassinated. So to say all that, I acknowledge that he was a historical man. But when it comes to the prognostications or the prophecies of this man, I don't agree. There's truth in the Metuneta. There's truth in the Purim Heru, the Imuni Elish tablets, etc. So it's truth in all these persuasions. But at the same time, we need foundation. And Torah in Ivrit doesn't mean law, it means teachings, instructions. So within each generation or dispensation, just as mathematics, even though it's elaborate, it's simple, we were broad in our understanding in Torah, right? The brother said something about Hamites, Hebrews are different. That's correct. And Hamites, not Hebrews. We agree with that. We know that the Hebrews are Shemitic. But even that, I could show that the Hebrew even existed before Shem. We're going to get into that as we develop into the PowerPoint presentation. This is where a greater understanding of Hebrew cosmogenesis and Hebrew anthropogenesis is going to come into effect. So to make it clear, we know that the Hebrews, from an academia sense, they're not Hamites. We know that. They're descendants of Shem. But we're going to get deeper into showing where Shem come from by the way of the antediluvian records. We're getting to that. But yeah, see what I'm saying? Yeah, Torah's foundation. Remember, my Lord, when you first learned to count, you first learned to count 0 to 9 or 1 to 10. And as you develop it mathematically, as Prince Emmanuel Ben Yahuda said it best, and what I'm demonstrating right now, your understanding of math starts to broaden. Now you're adding, you're subtracting, you're dividing, you're doing decimals. Then you start getting into algebra, 1, 2, 3, a trigonometry, a calculus, logarithms. The matrix of mathematics, it's a labyrinth, but it's simple. You're building from the foundation, 0 to 9, 1 to 10. This is the same thing when you start talking Torah. When each of us first got in the Torah, we first were taught Torah in a certain way. But as we developed through research and years of footwork by the way of traveling, exploring, our understanding of Torah, it starts to broaden. Absolutely. It's all predicated on what you call sacred geometry. And we're getting all that. As the brothers and sisters, they're going to enjoy this presentation tonight. So I hope I answered that question. Any more from the brother? Any more?
But let me ask you, so because my last question, before I get to my last question, I'm sorry, Daniel, I just got one quick question.
No, I'll take it. Fine.
All right, because so Old Testament, all right, so your belief, is there the Messiah that's spoken of in, I guess, Isaiah, is that Messiah coming to quote unquote save us? Is there going to be the third woe, the war, Babylon gonna fall and all that stuff right there, according to your teachers of the Torah?
That's a great question. Many tourists and the Israelites look at King David literally returning back, and he's the Messiah that's outlined in these prophecies. I don't acknowledge that. Okay. I acknowledge that first of all, the word Moshiach in Hebrew means anointed. We've been under the misconception that the word Messiah goes back to Moshiach. That's false. The word Messiah goes back to a Hebrew word, Moshiach. That means savior. You have Moshiach and you have Moshiach. So even though the words sound similar, they're different. In Hebrew culture, we had a concept of this anointed nation and then the anointed lineage of Davidic kings and Levitical priests. So the nation of Israel would be anointed to the nations of the earth, where the Levitical priests or the Davidic kings would be anointed to us, the nation of Israel, as a whole, like a domino effect. Like if you go into the book of Shemot, which you know as Exodus chapter 19, verse 5, it talks about how the nation of Israel is a kingdom of priests. We are a kingdom of Kohanim, or priests to the nations of the earth. The Levitical Kohanim are the Kohanim or the priests to the nation of Israel. This is the same with the we as a nation, the nation of Israel, would be anointed to the nations of the earth. So when a Goyim or a Gentile is in the presence of Dan Yahuda, he is the anointed, he is the Moshiach to the nations of the earth. If he's in front of a Chinaman, he is the anointed to the Chinaman. If he's in front of an Irishman, he is anointed to the Irishman, because he is a part of the nation of Israel that's anointed, or the anointed one to the nations, whereas our kings that come from out of the tribe of Yehuda would be the anointed, the nation of Israel. Our Levitical priests, mainly the high priest, would be anointed to us. Now we're getting back into sovereignty. You have the national jurisdiction and you have the ecclesiastical jurisdiction. The national jurisdiction is Davidic, Yehuda. The ecclesiastical jurisdiction is Lewi or Loa or Lewaya, however one wants to pronounce Levi. So the ecclesiastical Levi, the national Judah. This is what defines the anointed lineage. That's why you see in Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 28, 36, and 37 says, I will send you and your king into a strange land, which neither you nor thy fathers have known, and there you will worship idols, even wood and stone, and I will make you an object of horror, a proverb and a byword amongst the nations of the earth. That word Malach in that verse of Devarim chapter 28, it uses the word Moloch, not Malik. And remember, now one might say, well, why is that? Because those that were anointed to lead us into this Yah sense or consciousness would follow the nations of the earth, deities that came by the way of one of the first deification worship, which was fire worship. That's why I say, I will send you and your king or your Moloch into a strange land, and there you will worship idols, even wood and stone. So the Most High sealed our eyes when we went into captivity. So that's why I have a problem when we talk about the canonization of the New Testament, because at the time of our captivity, remember, the prophet's eyes was closed. Isaiah chapter 29 shows us this when it talks about for us to see and to hear, but we couldn't, and we were drunken and staggering, but not with wine. This was talking about us being totally denationalized. See how I'm lining the sovereignty with our historical past, present, and future. So I think I answered your question. But
hey,
yes,
man,
I do acknowledge, I do acknowledge there were always charismatic. This is why they created what is known as COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program to stop the rise of a Black Messiah who would electrify the nationalistic aims of Black America. That's why they killed Malcolm, huh? That's why they killed King, huh? That's why they set up and let Huey P. Newton get his brains blown out and a drug deal so-called going bad in Oakland, California. This is why they murdered Dr. Khaled Muhammad and many others that came before us, because they calculations through COINTELPRO, which they remodified with King Alfred plan, and then they broadened it from the blacks, so-called blacks, to the Hispanics and developed what is known as Rex 84. And then they started to target us more with the whole Y2K scare, and they came out with Project Megiddo. And Project Megiddo was a target on Hebrew Israelites who they labeled as Black Hebrew Israelites, that they claim had the potential to manifest domestic terrorism, and they lined us with white nationalist groups, right? You got to see what they doing. And we see even the demonization of this right now with the destruction of the Black man in the form of a R. Kelly, a P. Diddy, a Tupac, a Mike Tyson, a Bill Cosby. They're using sexual ritualism in the form of humiliation, right? Remember, this is all ritualism. They got us in the mind state to focus on the effect or the puppet, but we can never target the puppet master. And see, and this is what we're going to do today when I bring forth this PowerPoint presentation, because within this presentation, I'm also going to show the true origin of the so-called white race. See, when you read in biblically and we start to define, some say that the white race came through Japheth. Some say through Esau. I'm saying that they are a hybrid species that came by the way of subspecies, not a part of our hominin family that we mix with that produced this beast. We're going to get into that as we develop. But I hope I answered your question.
So they the real Gentiles. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. But my last question before I pass it over to Brother Don Yehuda, man. Hey, y'all hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Y'all also donate. I've been flashing this cash app. This is Brother the Mighty Hebrew cash app. Please hit the donation on that, man. Send it in. Type in the Scoring Black Man podcast or type in Mighty Hebrew on the hot seat when you send them. You know what I'm saying? So please hit that donation and hit that like button and subscribe button. That don't cost you a thing. Ask any, put in the questions y'all want to know what I'm saying to know. Put it in the chat. You know what I'm saying? We'll ask them at the end of his presentation. But my last question is it's a two-part question, but it's very simple. How long you been living out of the Matrix, Babylon the Great, aka United States of America? And when you move outside of America, did you get any kind of hate from Hebrew Israelites? Did Hebrew Israelites hate you for moving outside of America?
You funny, man. You funny. Yeah, I left 2021. As people know, I'm the founder of Hebrew Israelite Sovereign Nationalism. And this is our flag right here, as you can see. That's over me right now. I started to develop something called an International Habeas Corpus. And within the International Habeas Corpus, I presented this to the Crown, by the way of Victoria Street in London, England. And what I wanted to do is present and have presented to the world court that Israel were the so-called Negroes scattered in the diaspora. And I started to go to different Hebrew Israelite communities all throughout the United States, lecturing. And y'all can see this all on YouTube. And I was going all over lecturing about us being Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationals. And I was showing that 1619 was very important. And many other elders, such as Adon Yehoshaphat ben Yisrael, Sar Rabbah, Sar Zaquin Rabbah ben Israel, and others, was looking at this 1619, us coming into Jamestown, Virginia. Yes, their slavery or the transatlantic slave trade was before 1619. But the difference is when you start talking about the islands, it was a conglomerate of Israel and other ethnic tribes from Africa that wasn't Israel that were being separated and broke on the tribe of the broke on the islands, okay, of Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, and these areas. Now, the 1619 were direct Israelites that came from originally Israel, Northeastern Africa, into West Africa, directly to the United States, and became known as FBA, Foundational Black Americans, or African Americans, whatever name we want to call it today, right? And 1619 became very important because for us, 1619 and 2019 became the mark of the end of the 400-year captivity, so to say. Okay, that we see outlined in Bereshit or Genesis chapter 15, 13. And I know many try to say that was us in Egypt. But if one really understands how long we've been in Kemet, we only been in Egypt for 210 years. When you look at Shemot or Exodus, it tells us how long we were in Egypt. It says that we sojourned in chapter 12, verse 40 to 42. It says that we sojourned in Egypt for 430 years. So when you calculate the time when we start sojourning into the time of the children of Israel coming up in there, it would have been 430 years. But half of that, we were in bondage for 210 years. So that wasn't talking about what we see outlined in Bereshit chapter 15, verse 13. We're saying we're here at the Mighty Hebrew University, 1619 to 2019 was that 400 years. And what did we see going on at this time? We see the massive death of George Floyd, right? And it was symbolized as the nation of Israel. Because remember, the death of George Floyd didn't just affect Black Americans in the United States. This was a worldwide phenomenon. There were people that were dying all over the world protesting about the death of George Floyd, symbolic to the Hebrew nation of Israel. And as we develop more and more, what happens next? We see COVID. It came out of nowhere, boom. Even though the signs and symbols were there, but it came. We seen so much going on during this time that the Most High gave us, from judgment to post-judgment. Showing post-judgment, we had time to get out. So in 2001, me and my family, 2021, me and my family decided it's time to be a part of that fulfillment of prophecy. Genesis chapter 15, 18 gives us the demarcation stations of the lands of Abraham, from the great river Egypt to the Euphrates. The great river Egypt is in fact the Nile River, which is 4,200 miles long, starting at Lake Victoria, right? And Uganda, dropping into the Mediterranean Sea to the Euphrates. So the land of the promise is from East Africa all the way to Northeastern Africa, falsely called the Middle East. The term Middle East came in 1945 with World War II correspondents speaking about the location that they was at. But there is no such thing as the Middle East. Anybody that been to Israel, which I have many times, you can go right to the area where the African tectonic plate sits, where Israel sits right on the African tectonic plate. So we know that the separation of the so-called Middle East from the rest of the greater body of Africa is based on the Suez Canal, which the process started in 1859 to 1869, which was a 10-year period. So there's no such thing as the Middle East. If there is, where's the Middle North, the Middle South, and the Middle West? These are terms that Europeans have created to keep us away from talking about the connection of the so-called Middle East with the rest of the continent of Africa.
You absolutely said it 100% correct. The Suez Canal is the only thing that separates Israel from Africa. I remember before I became a Hebrew Israelite, I was sitting down and watching one of those Christian channels, and even the Christian channel said, well, Jesus couldn't have been white, being from the area. I ran upstairs and told my grandma, I said, hey, Jesus couldn't have been white. She said he would be more Middle Eastern. But what came to the truth, I'm like, ain't no damn Middle East. It's like Israel sits on the continent of Africa, but the Suez Canal, that this man-made canal, is used to separate us, and all these fake borders of these maps that they got. Every time you come up with a new map every year, it's new countries, new borders. So absolutely correctly, I'm gonna pass it over to the good brother Don Yehuda. Y'all hit that like button, man. Look here, man. Donate to the brother Mighty Hebrew right here. This is the cash out. You know what I'm saying? He giving y'all some Waka Flocka flame right now. You know what I'm saying? We got a lot of people in the building watching, man. You know what I'm saying? It's a hot show. Y'all know this is a controversial and deep biblical breakdown series sponsored by the Scoring Black Man podcast. And I'm going to bring everything on controversial. You know what I'm saying? Because we need to challenge, you know what I'm saying, challenging doctrines, man. Everybody got the same doctrine. They come from one West. Either they teaching this and that and the third is just all confusion. And stuff. So, you know, I like for people to be challenged. You know what I'm saying? I like for people to hear new teachers, new doctrines, man, because it's all relevant. Yeah, y'all hit the subscribe and like button. Oh, but I do got one other question. And make it real quick, so because I know Brother Don Yehuda is ready to ask you questions. What's your belief on what makes a Hebrew and a Hebrew Israelite? Is it the seed of the father? Is it the seed of the father and the mother, or is just the mother, or is Numbers 1 and 2 one of them the seed, the sperm of the father?
That's a great question. That's a great question. To answer the question, to understand Wayikra or Leviticus chapter 1, verse 18, and a lot of people use this as the seed of the father, right? We have to understand Ha'adam. When we go into the Bereshit breakdown, we've been under the impression that the word Ha'adam means man. No, it don't. The word Ha'adam means the firstborn or the first blood rising with outstretched arms. The word man goes back to a Sanskrit word manu, which means to think or thought. Now, one might say, well, why are you bringing this up? And he's asking the question about how do you determine one's nationality? Simple. The word Adam has the same root word, or goes back to the root word Adamah, which is the surface of the earth, so to say, or the earth's surface or ground. Now, peep the technique. You see the word Ha'adam. It doesn't say Adam, it says Ha'adam. Anytime it refers to quote unquote Adam, we're getting to that. Why I keep saying quote unquote in the presentation. Ha'adam, you see that word, that first Hebrew letter, Hey, or Ha, which is symbolic in the Sinaitic pictorial Hebrew hieroglyph of man, which is also inclusive of woman with an outstretched arms or outstretched arms facing the northern star. That's in the word Ha'adam. In the beginning of the word, we see the letter Hey. Now, when you go to Adamah, at the end of the word Adamah, you see Hey. So in the beginning of Ha'adam, you see Hey. And in the end of Adamah, you see Hey. The beginning, ended, the Alpha, the Omega. Ha'adam, based upon the ecological condition, right, is connected to the earth. And when we look at our bodies are plant slash fruit base in essence. So when we look at plants and vegetables and fruits and all that, the fruit is determined by the seed, right? So if you have an orange seed, you only can produce oranges. If you have apple seeds, you only can produce apples. Watermelon seeds, you only can produce watermelons. You only can produce after your own kind. So to say all that, I determine that one receives their nationality through the seed of the father. See, There's a difference by the way of the seed of the father and having the blood of your mother. Watch. Kamala Diva Harris is Irish by nationality, but holds the blood of her mother, because you determine the seed or the nationality through your father. When we look at Donald Jasher Harris, which is Kamala Diva Harris and Maya Harris's father, on his paternal side, we see Samuel Harris. And we know that Samuel Harris are half Irish and half English, so-called Jews. Samuel Harris has Joseph Alexander Harris, who is an Irish-English migrant. On the maternal side of the father of Kamala, we see what? We see Hamilton Brown, who is an ex-slave plantation owner. He had sexual relations with Mary Mulvinia. Mary Mulvinia was an East Indian woman that he has Christinia. Christinia and Joseph Alexander Harris get married. They have Oscar Joseph Harris. But you still see that line, that Irish seed still trickling down. You see that, right? And then from there, Oscar Harris marries Burr Finnegan, who they're now, which I was the first to bring this out, which they're now recognizing that picture that Kamala been lying about, saying that was her grandmother. That's not really Burr Finnegan. Burr Finnegan is also Irish. Burr Finnegan's mother, right? Iris Allen, who became Finnegan, right? Married Patrick Finnegan Jr., who Patrick Finnegan Jr.'s father and mother was Patrick Finnegan Sr. and Mary Watson. Mary Watson was Scottish. We got this breakdown. I'm showing all this to show that you determine your nationality through the seed of the father. Now, one might say, well, what if, you know, your father is black and your mom is white, and then your child marries a white woman, and this process keeps going on and on, would they still be Israelites? The answer is no. Because after the third generation, the third and fourth generation, they cut off. You see?
Correct.
Determined through the seed of the father. Now, I would advise that we stay amongst our own. So the strength would be great to have an Israelite mother, which is a so-called Negro, and an Israelite father. There are schools of thought, such as, you know, FOPE Israelites, who I know well. When you start talking about, shout out to Elder Quanaf and Sharshan, with the Israelite New School of Thought, all of them, they acknowledge that both parents have to be so-called Negroes. Now,
yeah, they got the Manzer. They got the Manzer doctrine.
Right, they believe in them. Right, and I wouldn't be one to argue that, because we do see instances where the Most High continuously within the higher self, we are warned through experience not to mix with the other nations. You see what I'm saying? And even with the attitude today within the Black American community, we've always had this back and forth with those that had parents that were both Negroes like myself. And then you have those that would have been considered mulatto. And there's always been this division. So the idea of the Manzar is there, even within the demonstration within the modern era amongst our people. So FOP Israelites have a powerful argument. It's a very powerful and strong argument, and I would agree based on nationalistic reasons. Because when you mix your seed, it can cause a lot of confusion. Because let's say if you have a child with, let's think, you have a child with a Kusan from out of South Africa, and that's two different cultures. With a Koshan versus you. And remember, the first teacher of the child is the mother. So
Right.
if a woman been raised in that way of life from the womb to the tomb, there's going to be influences. This is why it will be best for an Israelite so-called Negro man to marry an Israelite so-called Negro woman. Because if something happened to that man, she got that Israelite culture with her. You see what I'm saying? And that culture is going to be trickled down to that child versus you marrying a foreign woman and you try to absorb her into the culture. And we need to talk about that because there's no such thing as proselytizing. That's a lie. When it talks about one sojourn with us, is one that becomes a citizen amongst Israel by the way of naturalization. See, we talking sovereignty. They want us to believe any nation can just come and convert and be down with us. Verse, no, you're going to go through the proper channels of naturalization within the governmental structure of Israel by the way of Torah Constitution and become an Israelite citizen. You wouldn't be an Israelite national. You wouldn't be a Hebrew Israelite national. You would be a citizen because nationalism in the true sense is predicated on the seed of the father. Whereas though nationality today is determined by the state, meaning the country that you was born in. So there's a transition. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you pretty much said on that right there, because I believe, that it's the seed of the father, but I do also believe that after the third generation, if like let's say you got Blake Griffin's father, he's a Haitian. Blake Griffin, mother is a Caucasian. Now Blake Griffin and his brother, they, Israelites. Now Blake Griffin made Blake Griffin made a baby with a white woman. Now that baby still an Israelite. Now one more, he go back to a white woman. That's the third one right there. Hey, you white it out. Shout out to Watchman Yahoo and Sister Deborah. You white it out. You know what I'm saying? At that point, you know what I'm saying? In my opinion. But and I also agree that we should try to get a Israelite woman. But I also believe that the Israelites, that we are scattered abroad. I mean, the majority of us are on the western part of the world, but it's a whole lot of us on this eastern part of the world: Africa, Europe, Asia, and so forth and so forth. Australia and all that places.
Also, so everybody know, I don't cut my beard. I have alopecia. So I just need everybody to know, don't cut your beard. For the men, don't cut your beard. Y'all say, oh, my, no, I have alopecia. But there was a question that was being asked about Negro Israelites and Latino Israelites. I want to make this clear to the people. I do not acknowledge that the Latinos are Israelites. Now, I do acknowledge that there are Israelites amongst the Latinos. I don't acknowledge that the Native Americans as a whole in North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean islands are Israelites. I acknowledge that there are Israelites in the midst of them people. Okay.
The
Now let me explain.
Afro-Latinos.
Yes.
The Afro-Latinos.
Correct. Yes, correct. Now, let me explain my position. When you study up on the North American, South American, and Central American natives, they do not all go back to the same source. That's a lie. Even if we speaking scientifically and we talking haplogroups. For instance, and I'm only dealing with what is known as a comparative study. I'm not saying that I totally agree with everything they claim is science, but you can deal with things by the way of a comparative study or research. So you have, for instance, you have the O haplogroup. The O haplogroup would be considered your Hawaiians, your Samoans, your Marlesians, etc. And when you look at their oral tradition, they teach that they go back to Australia, that they would be of Australoid descent. When you start to study up on the Aztecs, right, the Mayans, etc., they would be considered Q haplogroups. A lot of them go back to Mongol descent and back to the Gobi Desert, by the way of Siberia and all them areas, right? Excuse me, not Siberia with them, excuse me, by the way of the Gobi. When you go into some of the North American Indians, like your Eskimos and all them, now you're starting to talk about Siberia, right? The point that I'm expressing is that all natives don't even go back to one source. Some go back to Australoid descent, some go back to Mongol descent, some go back to Polynesian descent. Now, the ones that are considered Israelites now, which you would call your Southeast United States Native Americans, some of the Cherokee, some of the Chippewa, some of the Blackfoot, some of the Seminole, etc. Are you with me?
Geechee,
Now,
Geechee.
the Geechee, most definitely. The Geechee are Israelites that came through the transatlantic slave trade, and even those natives that were here from the Southeast natives. Now, I tell you where the Southeast natives of the United States come from by the way of King Solomon's naval fleets. When King Solomon established his global seafaring empire, which later in history became known as your Phoenician Empire, the mantle became taken up with the northern kingdom of Israel, making it, because you see Solomon making this triple alliance with Hyman, king of Tyre, right, and Zidon, and you see the Pharaoh or King Solomon marrying a Egyptian Nasu of Pharaoh's daughter. We see that in the Book of Kings. I'm here to say that that family was the family of King Akhenaten and all them, Pharaoh Akhenaten, because when we understand the Amarnai tablets or letters, they called it the Amarnai tablets or letters because they found these inscriptions in Amarnai, Egypt, and Akhenaten's tomb or his sarcophagus. When we understand when the Canaanites were talking about the Harabu coming in, invading the land, they was talking about our people. You can see this in the Amarnine letters. You also can go into the Davenport Stela, the Long Island inscriptions, and you see the Triple Alliance languages of Canaanite, Egyptian, and Hebrew. So we know that King Solomon's fleets were coming from the old world to the new world to Lake Superior, taking ores from there and bringing it back to the old world. We also can see the mound buildings or these mounds that were being built that was also by Israel and certain altars that are clearly Israelite, distinguishing themselves from the rest of these so-called native tribes. So what I'm saying is that there are Israel in the midst of these people, but all these people are not Israel. The bulk of the North American, South American, and Central American Indians, they're not Israelites. They're not. Just
I
like
agree with
you
that
come
too.
back, just like when you come back to Africa, All the tribes in Africa are not Israelite. Now, when you start talking about the Bantu speaking tribes, yes.
Oh yeah.
But when you start talking about the Noahic tribes and Cushitic tribes and all that reside over here, they're not our people.
I agree exactly. And you know, I'm from Southeast Georgia. I'm from Waycross, Georgia, 912. And you know, my grandma, you know, they Cherokee Indians, all of them black, you know what I'm saying? The Cherokees, my granddaddy, you know what I'm saying? My bloodline is Gullah Geechee, you know what I'm saying? Start off in Southeast South Carolina, but my great granddaddy, he bought 200 some acres, you know what I'm saying, as a freeman in Southeast Georgia. And you know what I'm saying, we passed that knowledge down, you know what I'm saying? So shout out. So now I'm gonna pass it over to Brother Don Yehuda. I don't did enough talking, enough asking questions. I appreciate you answering all my questions. Brother Don Yehuda, man, floor is yours.
Man, you didn't leave no meat on the bone, brother.
Hey man, I didn't have no questions written down. I was just gonna ask him, hey man, just give me a background of how you came up. The first question, that's all I had. But it just kept coming. I said, all right,
Yeah,
shit, man. It's fire right now. I gotta keep it hot right now.
Well, listen, since you've been touched, because the Prince been touching on a lot of things. He had a lot of points just in that whole introduction right now. So since you on sovereignty and nationalism and things of that nature, can you expound on people identifying themselves as Hebrew Israelites as it pertains to nationality? Because there's a thought process that you shouldn't combine Hebrew and Israelite together. You won't find that in scripture, so to say. So I heard you break that down before. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, first and foremost, giving all praise and honor to Yahuwah, the supreme, intelligent, powerful one of our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. When one says that the term Hebrew Israelite is an outline in the Tanakh, Hebrew Israelite, they're correct in that sense. But understand the thought was there. Now, what do I mean by that? When you say Hebrew, we know that the word Hebrew is pronounced Ivri, and it means past, as an ancient. If I say to you, Shalom Aki, I'm saying completeness, my brother. If I say Shalom Akoti, I'm saying completeness, my sister. That hard ye sound or that yo at the end of the word Hebrew that you see in Genesis chapter 14:13 is defining a possession. So it doesn't mean one who crosses over. That's not what it actually means. It means my past as an ancient. So the first identifiable factor that we see in the scripture with that name Eber or Hebrew would be Eber. When you go into Jonah chapter 1, verse 9, we see Jonah identifying himself as a Hebrew. We see that. Also, if you go outside the scripture and go into the Sinaitic inscriptions, within the Sinaitic inscriptions, we see in 1870 BCE, we're identifying ourselves as Hebrews or Ivriim, right? So when you say Hebrew Israelite, you're identifying your nationality and your tribal heritage at the same time. Because we see all throughout the scripture that the Israelites were known as Hebrews. We see in the book of Shemo or Exodus, we see that Moshe or Masha, Moses or Musa, however one wants to pronounce his name, was told by Yahweh to speak into the Parah or the Nasuk, the Pharaoh, that the supreme power or the supreme sovereign power of the Hebrews, right, See, what is happening is that we are fulfilling the prophecy once again, being the mockingbird that we've always been. Because academia is telling us that Hebrews are not a people, it's a language. But my question would be, isn't French a language, but it's also a people? Isn't Spanish a language, but also a people? Isn't Arabic a language, but Arabs are also, or Arabians are also a people? The point that I'm expressing is all throughout the Tanakh, Hebrew is being identified as being a part of a people, going back to Eber. And as I outlined in Jonah chapter 1, verse 9, and if you can pull that up real fast, brother, and read that in Jonah chapter 1, verse 9, Jonah calls himself a Hebrew. So if Jonah, the prophet of Yahweh, called himself a Hebrew, why would it be a problem for us calling ourselves Hebrews? Right? And if you got that real quick, Don Yehuda, could you read that out loud to the listening and watching audience, so it don't seem like I'm just coming from out the side of my neck, that they can hear it with their own ears?
Got you. Give me a second.
Hallelujah.
You said Jonah 1:9?
Yes, chapter 1, verse 9. Ken Adoni, Tamshi.
All right, I'm gonna read it out the book because I can't pull it up right now. So this is Jonah
That's fine.
chapter 1, verse 9. And he said unto them, I am an Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, which have made the sea and the dry land.
Checkmate. So Jonah right there called himself a Hebrew, but he was an Israelite. So the thought was there. You see, the thought was there. The children of we're Israelites because we're descendant of the man Yaakov, Jacob, whose name was changed to Yisrael. Remember, Jacob was a Hebrew. Remember when Joseph was in the dungeon? Joseph identified himself as a Hebrew. So the thought of the Israelite understood themselves as being Hebrew, right? So in essence, Hebrew Israelites. Now, the term Hebrew Israelites came in the 20th century as a compound word when Israelite leaders from Chicago, like Rabbi Richard Nolan, the late Rabbi Divine, the late Rabbi Hodges, Rudolph R. Windsor, all these different scholars, Prince Asiya, they all came together and wanted to distinguish themselves from the Jewish population, because many of the newspapers and the writings and clippings, they was defining us as Black Jews. To call us Black Jew is to say basically a white Jew, just like when the Nation of Islam developed, they were calling them Black Muslims. See these, and remember, when you start talking Black, you talking the social status. You're not talking color. And they understood this when they labeled Black to Muslim or Black to Jew. So the first person to say, we're not Jewish, we're Hebrew on record, we see this with the late Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford. But then later teachers took up that mantle and said, okay, we're going to separate ourselves. And now we're Hebrew Israelites. We're going to use the ancient terminologies of what our ancestors defined ourselves as, to distinguish ourselves from the Jewish population. That's why you never hear the Jewish people call themselves Hebrew Israelites. They say that they Jewish. You will never hear them say, like, as a group, we're the Hebrew Israelites. That's how you know that We are the children of Israel. And the good book to get on this discussion and question is written by Kohen Mikael ben Levi, known as Israelites and Jews, the significant difference. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you answered my question. So my next question is, for everybody that's within the Israelite community, there's pretty much a consistent foundation of a belief or ideology amongst most of the Israelite community, especially by way of One West here in America. What would you say was the catalyst? Because I know you came up in a different school of thought. You had different elders that you learned under and have a vastly different understanding. But what was the catalyst that changed your understanding or improved upon your understanding of the scriptures and historicity versus the mainstream beliefs of the Israelite community?
That is an excellent question right there, Ben Yahuda. One of the things that caused me to, first of all, I always had that leading spirit because of my parents. I want to give a shout out to my parents because my father and my mother, they were never followers. They were always leaders. They had some form of a leadership role, whether it was street gang related or now getting into the Nation of Islam, et cetera, et cetera. They always played this role. So there were a lot of, inspiring people that came out of my family. Quiet as it's kept, not to brag, on my father's side, Michael Jordan, the basketball player, is my third cousin. On my mother's side, the late founder of Bad Gas Pipe playing Rufus Harley, that's my great uncle. My grandmother and Rufus Harley are brother and sister. So I've always had, certain charismatic leaders in my family, so to say. So that plays a role, number one. Number two, I started to notice, on social media that there was this, to me, a conspiracy. I'm gonna call it for what I see it, to give a monolithic blanket suggestion that all Israelites think the same. And what they did was, and this is no disrespect, so I want to make this clear. There's no disrespect to the One West communities, but they use mainly GMS, IUIC, and ISUBK as the poster child of Israel, so to say. So when one brings up Israel, that's the first thing you think of. Like they already programmed your thought to think that. So you have preconceived program questions to ask. The 12 tribe chart, are the Latinos Israelites, et cetera, et cetera. Is Jesus' real name Yahweh Shai, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are playing in the psyche by the way of social media, right? But the Israelite community existed way before these three One West schools. My research takes the oldest Israelite community in the United States is 1798. And we know this as Israel Hill. And there's a book that you can get known as Israel on the Aftermaths. And it breaks down that slaves ran from these slave masters and built Israel Hill, and that they were the first to present Israelite customs. Okay. And we can see the influences of this idea of Israel Hill through Nat Turner, Gabriel's Rebellion. We see old man Billy Simmons. Y'all with me? We see that slave that came out of Maryland. William S. Crawley, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole point that I'm saying is that there's this blanket understanding. And with many within the Afrocentric Black conscious community have done is they demonize the One West camps as being non-scholarly. So what they do, most of them, is get Israelites that build on the scripture from a religious standpoint, and they use them as poster child vehicles to tarnish scholarship in Israel that's not known to the mass media. So to say, people don't know about Dr. Sar Kazriel or Sar Dr. Kazriel bin Yahuda, Dean of the School of the Prophets Institute. They don't know, in Damona, Israel, Northeastern Africa, they don't know about Sar Dr. Amanuel bin Yahuda, founder of the African Edenic Heritage Museum. They don't know about the late Prince Dr. Shalia bin Yahuda, the founder of the School of the Prophets Institute in Damona, Israel, and the Hebrew Royal Seal, or the Hebrew wisdom of the Great Royal Seal, and these different adapt sciences. They don't know about many of the Israelite scholars, such as Zaquin El Natan Be Adam, that come from out of Beit Hetzabah. The point that I'm saying is, because of the also I don't want to forget the founder of the Jerusalem Chronicle newspaper, Zaquin Adon Yehoshaphat in Israel. So there are scholars in our community that they know nothing about. All they know about is Professor Rudolph R. Windsor. You get the King James Version only Bible, the Apocrypha, and Babylon to Timbuktu. Boom, you're an Israelite. You see what I'm saying? So you have, but that's not getting twisted. That has its base because that's the foundation. Remember, we was talking earlier about mathematics. And what has happened, many people have remained waist deep in that beginning foundation, and they haven't elevated because they think elevation is to disregard the foundation. That's not true. The foundation becomes broadened. You see, and our people have to understand when they hear these things that I'm bringing forth, it's not that I'm challenging you, I'm challenging myself. Every time Michael Jordan tried to move or heighten the stats, he wasn't challenging the predecessors before him. He was challenging himself. LeBron James, the same. He's not challenging Michael Jordan on the surface level that appears as such. But we understand as men of renown that LeBron James was challenging himself. And this is what we have to come into grips. We have to now challenge ourselves, judge ourselves. Remember, there's no Hebrew word in our language for prayer. The word tefillah has been mistranslated into the word prayer. The root word is palah, which means to judge oneself. To say all that is we must now challenge our academia. We must now move and shape our own ethnogenesis. So to say, our own anthropogenesis, our own cosmological genesis, so we can elevate. When you're dealing in Torah, you're dealing in mathematics. Because remember, our words or our letters is just not letters defining words, but our letters also define numbers. Y'all know this as Israelites. Our letters is our numbers too. So we're talking about mathematics vibrating from the subjective to the objective. And we see this in understanding the seven emanated cycles of our Adamic consciousness that I will be presenting in my PowerPoint. And I know I'm gonna have to do a part two, right? Because we didn't even get into the PowerPoint yet, but we're going to get into some of it today. And I will come back and do a part two because, like I said, it's a lot, but it's simple. But I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. So with that being said, I want to segue because I'm not going to ask anymore, but just one last question so it can kind of segue into some of the PowerPoint because I know we've been kind of long-winded. I also want to give a shout out to author Lee Cummins, who's been in the chat. I want to shout out that brother Shalom and Peace, another esteemed elder in the community. With that being said, to anybody who is not in the know, Prince Landine, aka the Mighty Hebrew, has an understanding of philosophy that he teaches in the Mighty Hebrew University called Hebrew Cosmogenesis and Anthropogenesis, right? And I guess my question would be to you is, this will kind of segue into it. Could you explain the connection or the origin of the ancient Indus Valley people and the Hebrews as mentioned in some of your writings? I think that would kind of segue us into that whole understanding right there.
That's a fact. First, I want to give a shout out to Professor Lee Cummins. That's a close elder of mine. I was the one that introduced him to FOP Israelites. I was introduced to Professor Lee Cummins by my late spiritual grandfather, may he rest in completeness, the late Prince Asiel in Israel. He introduced me and Professor Lee Cummins, and ever since me and him had a tight relationship. So give a shout out to Professor Lee Cummins. I see Anonymous Hebrew in the building, which is one of my students / also one of my teachers, because we have to understand a teacher in Hebrew culture is an intensified student. So he may be younger than me, but I learned a lot from all of y'all are my teachers and my students simultaneously, because it's like the Nation of Gods and Earth say, each one teach one. Or the Rastafarians say, I and I. So we looking at things based on principle. Now getting into the Indus Valley, that's a great question. When you go into Bereshit, the 11th chapter, it speaks about how that the world, the earth was one, it spoke one language, etc., and that we traveled from the east and we found a plain called Sinar. We hear that. Well, the Hebrew word in ancient Hebrew for earth is Ratazah. In modern Hebrew, Eretz. Eretz also means ground, field, land. So it shouldn't say earth as the whole planet, but more or less a region, okay, that spoke this uniform language, right? And from my research, it was the language which we define esoterically as Zinzar. We'll get into that another time. But you see that we come from the east. The Hebrew word east is Kadim. And Kadim throughout the Tanakh is always identified with the Indus Valley. And it says that we found a plain called Sinar. Sinar is the Hebrew word for Sumer. The ancient Sumerians were a group of ex-Brahmins that were running from the Indus Valley during the Ramayanian War, roughly around 7400 BCE. You're seeing this migration. You're seeing this migration because I apologize a little bit. No, it wasn't 7400. I was thinking about something else. The last flood happened 9564 BCE. So after this, you see now this process of the Ramayanian War and these ex-Brahmins migrating into Mesopotamia from the Indus Valley. You can go into the books of the Josephus, and Josephus lets you know that the original Hebrews come from out of the Indus Valley. You can go to Clarius. You can go to the classical writers that say that we're from the Indus Valley. Now watch this. Homer, along with Herodotus, talks about two Ethiopias: the Eastern Ethiopians, the Western Ethiopians. We also see this outlined in the books of Anacalypsis by Sir Godfrey Higgins. Sir Godfrey Higgins. Now, years ago, I was under the impression that the Eastern Ethiopians would be considered your Shemitic tribes and your Western Ethiopians your Cushitic tribes. That's false, because most Afrocentric scholars that teach that from an Israelite perspective, and then you got the other side of Afrocentric scholars that teach that the Western Ethiopians were the Cushitic tribes that stayed in Ethiopia, and the Eastern Ethiopians, these Cushitic tribes migrating from Africa into the Indus Valley. They say that because they don't know the backdrop of the story. So let me explain it. You see in the books of Esther, chapter 1, how Xerxes ruled 127 provinces from the Indus Valley to Ethiopia. So what's happening and what's been happening is that the Eastern Ethiopians are a group of Hebrews known as the Yadavas. The Yadavas were the ones that stayed in the Indus Valley. Then you had a group of Yadavas that left the Indus Valley and migrated into what is now known as Asia Minor, Canaan land, Egypt. They became known as your Western Ethiopians. So your Eastern Ethiopians are your Hebrews known as the Yadavas that stayed in the Indus Valley. Your Western Ethiopians are your Hebrews or your Yadavas that migrated into Asia Minor, Canaan land, Egypt, etc. When Jacob named his fourth son Judah, he was naming his son after a pre-existent tribe of Judah known as the Yadavas. The Yadava is the Sanskrit word for Judah. Abraham's tribe from the Indus was Yadava. And from the Yadavas, these Hebrews from the Indus Valley, born the Hebrews from Mesopotamia, etc., etc. I hope I answered your question.
Yep, you answered it definitely, sir. Let me see, because that's kind of going down the rabbit hole. Can you expound a little bit more on just the whole concept of um, the Hebrew Cosmogenesis and the cycles that are entailed in that? You know, going from the 7 cycles of the Elohim descending down into the corporeal state and so forth.
That I'm gonna explain that in the PowerPoint. That's the topic. I'm gonna show the videos that what you calling the 7 days of creation are really 7 root epics. And we've been under the impression that the word Yam corresponds to the word day. Now, that can be true in the abstract sense. But remember, Hebrew took a lot of twisting and turning during the Hellenistic era. So when you get your Strong's concordances, a lot of the Hebrew words are translated based on abstract Greco-Roman Hellenistic thought. What we do at the Mighty Hebrew University is we take the words back to its concrete thought by the way of using the Sinaitic pictorial Hebrew hieroglyph that we see in the Sinaitic inscriptions. And when we see the word Yawam, you see the word Yod there, which in the Hebrew, Sinaitic pictorial Hebrew, is symbolic to an outstretched arm, right? Plant, clamping on something. Then you see the Wa, which is an image of a nail pressing down on something. And then you see the Meme or the Ma, which is water waves. So when you say Yom or Yawam, now you're defining that which containeth life. So instead of the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, you have the first containment of life, the second containment of life, the third containment of life. So now you're talking root epic starting 311 trillion, 40 billion years ago to 100,000 BCE. And we're going to get into that all in the PowerPoint presentation as we continue on.
Okay, perfect. So I guess right now, Hilltop, we should probably just go ahead and Prince Landine touch up on some of the PowerPoint. I don't know how deep you want to go into it, because I know it could be a very lengthy conversation, and I'm here for all of the convos. But if you want to, I don't have any other questions because that's just going to lead us further, into other thought processes and knowledge. But it's whatever y'all want to do. You muted, Hilltop.
You muted.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, y'all could go ahead and do a shameless plug while I get this power point set up here. It's already set up. I just want to get to the back. So yeah, y'all shameless plugs, man. Shameless plugs.
Hey, while he getting that set up, go and donate. Give your hard-earned earnings to the earnings to Prince Landine, because I want him to really touch on why it's important that we support one another and give our free will offerings to leaders and elders like this brother. Can you just touch on your repatriation that's going on over in Tanzania real quick?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I give all praise and honor to Yahweh, the supreme, intelligent, powerful one of our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yeah, I came here by the way of the late Prince Asiel. He sent me out here to spread my concept of Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism to the Bantu Israelite speaking tribes out here. And what I've developed thus far is I have the Ancient Bantu Hebrew Israelite Awareness Center. I have a farmhouse here where we have our own chickens, our own goats, a couple of acres of land, which is also connected to a guest house. Y'all might have heard of the famous herbologist. He came, Mikael Ben Ora came. You had semi-basketball player champion, Brian Waters came. So a whole bunch of people, the hip hop conscious Israelite artists, Yo Ah came out to see me. A bunch of people, the general, a bunch of people. Here where I'm at right now is a guest house where brothers and sisters can come and experience the prophecies of Genesis chapter 15, 18. And also, this is a bridge if one wants to repatriate, because right now we see what's going on in the United States right now. Like it's even Stevie Wonder can see. And what this does is this helps to facilitate what we have. Look at the nations of the earth. The Chinese people come into our communities and open up Chinese stores in our communities, and they take all our hard money because we go to these Chinese stores and we feed their objectives. And in turn, not only do they keep money in the United States for themselves, but they have a nationalistic pride and they send money back home to their people. And in turn, it boosts up their economy. We have to come in the mind state that we have to support our own in the sense of your teachers. I'm talking footwork, because this project, and I can prove it by showing receipts. I spent over 100,000 USD, over 100,000 USD on this project that we have here in Tanzania. And that's a lot of money. But to keep it rolling, we have to hustle. Our people have to get into the nationalistic mind state to support the things that we have. We have to support our brothers and sisters in Damona, Israel. We have to support our brothers and sisters that's connected to our communities throughout Africa. Damona is the central base. But we have communities in Ghana, we have communities in Togo, South Africa, Tanzania, where I'm the head prince at over here with the community here. So things have to run. We got to pay bills. We have electric, gas, internet, keeping things functioning. Different families come to visit by the way of, wanting just to get away from the United States, thinking about leaving from the United States. So when Israelites come, because I hosted dozens of families, when Israelites come, they don't have to worry about going to the locals to get hotels. They can stay in the guest house of the Mighty Hebrew for free. You get breakfast and dinner for free. Now, you may have to pay for your lunch, and if you traveling and things, yeah, then certain monies are involved. And when you leave, whatever donation or offering you want to give when you leave, that's what you give. I have Professor James Smalls coming past here this December. Everybody know who Professor James Smalls is. Yes. So that's where we at. We have to support one to another based on the projects that we have. We can't no more just say we Israelites in a religio sense, because you got to look every day you giving money to the beast system. When you like one person, I asked for a donation. I'm not gonna put their name out there because it's unnecessary. And he said, "Oh man, you have to, you know, build your own resource, etc., etc." And I said, "Your own," and I'm saying to him directly to him, "You think going to work every day in the United States make you independent? No, you're working for a system to feed their objective to keep you in captivity. All nations on the planet that are in the United States send accoutrements and revenue back to their mother and father country. And people, they do that. The only ones that have this complacent mind state is foundational Black Americans, because we're in this miracle mind state that it's going to be a miracle that we get out of captivity. Verse in measurement, we put ourselves in captivity. So in measurement, we have to come from out of captivity. So we have to support our enterprises. We have to support the Akbar Brotherhood School that's stationed in Damona, Israel. We have to support the Ancient Bantu Hebrew Israelite Awareness Center that I'm building, etc., etc. But it's a definite thing that we have to support on levels like that. This cannot keep functioning just me alone or the community that I have here alone. We can't. We have to have a greater body of Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationals that support, because 9 times out of 10, when it starts really going down, y'all going to have to come this direction. So we have to develop bridges. We got to get out of this mind state that it's not going to go down in the United States. Every nation has to be judged that had Israel in captivity. You so-called Negroes need to stop with the prolonging of the destruction of the United States. It is because of your procrastination that they haven't been fully judged yet. Come from out of her, Israel, my people. Hallelujah. I hope I answered your question. So all donations
But
are welcome. And then even if you look at the Black conscious community, them brothers and sisters over there, they support them each other. And we know that a lot of them, and I'm not pointing out no fingers, but a lot of them was running massive scams on our people. And when there's a brother or sister that really got something going on, y'all won't even support. And that's how a lot of y'all enterprises crumble and fall short because y'all don't understand the wrong and the right. Like I said in my rhyme, y'all don't understand the wrong and the right. The food from the wise. Our domes is now clouded with sick foam. Now we walk in zombie zoning. So we got to understand right and wrong. Everything has become reversed now. So it's very imperative and important that y'all support the cause and donate. It's a difference from just breaking down just the Bible alone. No, I'm not going to charge nobody, but or ask for a donation. But when it comes to ground footwork research, things have to be paid for. You got to keep these things maintained. You got to the rent of the properties. Doing ground footwork research. Researching these tribes of Israel scattered throughout Israel. It takes revenue. You got to travel to these places. You got to have lodges to live. You gotta give an offering to the community that you're interviewing, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that can only take place if we support our cause as Hebrew Israelites on the national. Hallelujah.
All praises, all praises. Yeah, definitely very powerful. Once again, family, it's very important that we practice group economics because, like he said, this nation is being judged. And even if you don't believe in the scriptures, which you should do, I mean, history tells you that each empire only lasts about 250 years, and America is at 248 right now. So, even with just that understanding of history, coupled with the scriptures, you know that it'd be in your best interest to start investing in international interest, trade, and resources and trying to position yourself because at some point, like the scriptures say, we're going to be eating and drinking and not knowing when the destruction is going to come. So get your mind right, get your resources and finances right, and start supporting these brothers and sisters as boots on the ground in other places and locations that can help us out when the time comes. So with that being said, we're gonna get into some of
uh,
this
let
PowerPoint
me say
Prince
something
Slam
real quick,
dealing.
though.
All
Let me
right,
say
go
something
ahead.
real quick. Stop waiting for the chariots to fly. You know what I'm saying? That doctrine, that one West doctrine right there is gonna be the destruction of a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to sit there. That don't mean sit in America and wait for the chariots to fly. You need to be trying to travel and increase your knowledge and be trying to find places to go. You know what I mean? You got to flee Babylon mentally first, then you can flee physically. You know what I'm saying? Leave that Babylon American doodle over there in America, and then you could travel out the country and move out the country. You know what I'm saying? But don't be listening to all that. I'm gonna sit here and wait for the chairs to fly. Well, you gonna sit there and be waiting to get burned up too. But go ahead, brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, I give all praise and honor to Yahweh, the supreme, intelligent, powerful one of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Do us for striving for righteousness' sake. I say unto the family, Shalom Aleichem. Understanding the seven emanated cycles of Ha-Adamic consciousness. What is that? When we look in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, we see the Hebrew word chayim or chag, which we translate as festival, but it also defines a circular pattern, so to say. So in our culture, we told our time based on cycles and seasons. So it's a continuous action. And as the brother proceeds on in the next slide, I say out of my book, 311 trillion, 40 billion BCE to now, I say that the realization of truth is the ultimate weapon to manifest one's reality. We, the children of Israel, have to come into the realization of defining our reality based on the destiny that was given to us through our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We have got into a state of complacency known as religiosity. And just as the brother said, Hilltop said, we got to get out of this mind state of waiting for the chariot, a physical chariot / UFO to come save us. But let's see what the real chariot is by going to the next slide. The real chariot is you, as you can see right there. We see this astral being known as Adam HaChachma. And Adam HaChachma is an asexual being that's neither male nor female, but have both male and or masculine and feminine principle, known as Zokowa Nikiva in the Ivrit. And you see shining from the apex of the dome, known as the Keter. And you see the circle over the Keter, the head. The UFO, the unidentified flying object, is the mind. You are the mothership. That's why you see within Adam HaChachma, you see this 360-degree cipher that this Ha'adam sits within. And as we see the elders, we have to give accolade to those that came before us. These are my elders that came. And in the center, we see the late Ben Ami. We see my master teacher. On the left, Prince Asiel. We see Prince Dr. Shaliak Ben Yahuda sitting down. These are the elders from the community that I come out of, which is known as the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, also known as the Kingdom of York, stationed in Dimona, Israel, Northeastern Africa. Next slide. And you see the elders continue in the next slide. And sometimes the elders come in threes. As you see Prince Dr. Shaliak on the far left. On the far right, you see Prince Asiel. And then in the center, down the bottom, you see Ben Ami, and you see the radiance coming from out of the crown, the Keta, right? The Kippah. And it says 3 holy spirits dwelling in the heavens, or what we know in Kabbalistic Hebraic thought as the Azuletic world of existence and pure will, or the set apart winds. Next slide. And then we see Ben Ami again, 1939 to infinity, that 8 sitting on its back, so to say, that there is no ending to the thoughts that was brought forth from one of our forefathers in the 20th century. Next slide. So now we're getting into the meat of the subject matter, the 7 root races of the terrestrial cosmic era. And we see that we have the first root race, which is identified as the polar root race, or which we call the Elohim root epic, when we were in a cosmological etheric state, trickling down into a watery element, which you get the Hyperborean. So we, Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationals, we have no beginning or ending. We are the Elohim embodied in human form. We have a 311 trillion, 40 billion year history. Now, one might say, well, where are you getting that from? Remember earlier, I already established that the original Hebrews of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob go back to a Hebrew clan known as the Yadavas. Abraham and them, they were ex-Brahmins. They were ex-Brahmins. but there were some sciences within the Brahmanistic thought process that were true, such as the Yuga cycles. So it is more practical for Bible readers within our nation to use the 4 Yuga cycles to study the Bereshit or the Genesis code inside Ha-Tanakh, right? The ancient Hebrews, now I'm in my book, 311 trillion, 40 billion BCE to now. I say that the ancient Hebrew word Yawam or Yah means that which containeth life. In concrete Eastern Hebraic thought, in Greco-Roman you're a Gentile abstract Western thought, Yawam or Yam is translated as day in the abstract sense, which has thrown off our original understanding of our cycles and seasons as the original children of Israel. The correct way to see the first chapter of Bereshit, chapter 1, or Genesis by way of Hebrew Cosmogenesis and Hebrew Anthropogenesis is this: 1, or the first Yom or day, Bereshit chapter 1, verses 1 to 5, within Torah Constitution, on the abode of Yahweh Elohim. 100 years of Yahweh Elohim. Life equals 311 trillion, 40 billion human years, or the passing of time on earth. Second Yom, Bereshit 168 within Torah Constitution. This means 1 year of Yahweh Elohim time, which is 12 months or 360 days, equals 3 trillion 110 billion 400 million human years. Third Yom or day, Bereshit chapter. Oh, you went down. You went. Well, you can stay. Yeah, stay right there. Yeah. Okay. This means 1 month. Or let me go back. Third Yom or Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 9 to 13 within Torah Constitution. This means 1 month of Yahweh Elohim time equals 259 billion 200 million human years. Fourth Yom or day, Bereshit 1, 10 to 19 within Torah Constitution. This means 1 24-hour day of Yahweh Elohim. Time equals 8 billion 640 million human years. Fifth Yom or day, Bereshit 1, verses 20 to 23 within Torah Constitution. This further means 1 hour of Yahweh Elohim. Time equals 360 million human years. 6 Yom or day, Bereshit, Genesis 1:24 to 31 within Torah Constitution. This also means 1 minute of Yahweh Elohim. Time equals 6 million human years. And last, the 7th Yom day, Bereshit, Genesis 2:1 to 4 within Torah Constitution. And to conclude, this means 1 second of Yahweh Elohim. Time equals 100,000 human years. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. So we see in the next slide, us, Elohim embodied in human form, coming from the Elohim root epic down until we crystallize in ourselves in bodily form. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 is a very important number to understand the Bereshit code in the Yuga cycle. So now we're getting into the meat of the subject matter. We are Adam, Chachma, and Lumeria. Adam, Chachma, and Lumeria. And what do you see? You see that asexual being Adam or Ha'adam, masculine and feminine. And what do you see behind it? The Sephirotic tree of lives. Now watch this. We're about to deal in some sacred geometry. When you go to the GDs, the gangster disciples, they represent the 6, don't they? And when you go to the Vice Lord, they represent the 5, right? When you go to the Israelites in most cases, because many falsely believe that the star Moloch is the same as the shield of David, when it's not. When the shield of David existed before Moloch or David existed. It's dealing in sacred geometry. So you got the 6 from the Israelites. And with the Moors, you got the 5. The blood. Now, when you start talking about Crips on the West Coast and Bloods, they weren't representing like the 6 points and all that. That came later, more on the East Coast. So not to disrespect anybody, I'm speaking about the blood from the East Coast. They represent the 5. And many of the Crip in the East Coast, like the Crips in Pittsburgh and all that, they represent the 6. When you look at the Sephardic tree of life, it is the inverted and the horizontal, the 6 and the 5 coming together, borning from the surface of the earth, or Ha'adam. Ha'adam is not a man, but it's defining an ecological condition, being born from the earth's surface, known as Adamah. Let's get it. Next slide. So now we at the root races and sub-root races. Now, one might say, well, don't that come from the Theosophical Society? You can go to the next slide. You're going to see root races and sub-races. And they say that come from Madam H.P. Blavatsky. No, it don't. No, it don't. When you read something called The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1 and 2, also Isis Unveiled, Theology and Science. When you read The Secret Doctrine, it's a commentary breaking down an ancient Indus Valley record known as the Stanza of Zion. The Stanza of Zion, excellent book. You got to get Unveiling Genesis. Mystery of the Root Races and Cycles by Philip Lindsay that he's showing. And I got that as well. And I recommended many of my students to get it, and they got it. And what you see in the stanza of Zion is a history of what is known as Tamal Nudu, which the world now calls Lumeria, and Patala, what they call Atlantis. Okay? To really understand the existence of these realities, you have to understand what I define at the Mighty Hebrew University as antediluvian history and post-diluvian history. So right here, you see 3, Lumerian. Now, 4 is blank. The reason why the number 4 is blank, because at this time, roughly around 36 million BCE, or roughly 60 million BCE to 34 million BCE, our bodies, it's not fully coursed or solidified. That's why when you read the book of Psalms, it talks about how we walked on this plane first with bodies of glorious light. So we're going from light being into physical. So now you see 3-5 of Lumeria. And what do you see? You see the word Negro there. Now, remember how I said that Israel is Elohim embodied in human form? Y'all heard me say that. And what I'm saying is we, the children of Israel, are not like the other nations. When you go to Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 19, it lets you know that Israel is the former and fashioner of the multiverse. So having that understanding, Israel existed before we was even on this plane in the physical form. You can also back that up with Deuteronomy chapter 32. And it talks about how the Most High gave the sons of man their demarcation stations in accordance to the number of the children of Israel. The children of Israel was 70 souls, 69 came in. Joseph was already there. That's 70 souls. When you go to Genesis chapter 10, there's 70 nations, right? But how would the Most High divide the nations, their demarcation stations, based upon the children of Israel if the nations came first before the children of Israel? So that means that the children of Israel must have pre-existed. Another story, another topic. And this is where I'm bringing this all in, with us being in what is known as the Lemurian root epic. And you see 5 and 6, they're filled, but 7 becomes blank. 7 is blank because the Lemurian root epic, or the Tamanadu root epic, borns the Patalian or the Atlantean root epic. Number 1, you see who? The Ramorhus, correct? You see the Ramorhus. You see the Ramorhus, and I want to read to the family real fast the description of the Ramorhus, because one might say, well, who are the Ramorhus? Well, here's the book right here. It's called Legends of Atlantis and Lost Lemuria by minor archaeologist W. Scott Elliott. So we're going to read the description of the Ramorhus and where they come from, so we can have an understanding that this is the antediluvian ancestors of the ancient Hebrews. See, we're not even in post-diluvian. I'm going to show you the antediluvian ancestors of the Hebrews. So I'm on page 29, the Ramorhus race. The Ramorhus race came into existence between 4 and 5 million years ago, at which period large portions of the great southern continent of Lemuria still existed, while the continent of Atlantis had not assumed its proportions it ultimately attained. It was upon the spur of this Lemurian land that the Ramorhus race was born. Roughly, it may be located at latitude 7 north and longitude 5 west, which a reference to any modern atlas will show to lie on the Ashanti coast of today. It was a hot, moist country where huge antediluvian animals lived in reedy swamps and date forests. The Ramorhus were a dark race, their complexion being the sort of mahogany black. Their height in these early days were about 10 or 12 feet, truly a race of giants. So we see these Ramorhus break off coming from out of the Madagascarian, Tanzanian area, and they started to push into West Africa, Ashanti land. This is why they found something called the Eye of the Sahara. And this is where they're saying that Atlantis developed. And as we read on, we see roughly around 2.8 million BCE, your first natives of South America. At this time, it was known as the city of the Golden Gate, also known as Ruta, born a group known as Tavaklis. The Ramorhus started to teach the Tavaklis diamond power or pyramid power. That's why when you look, and we're going to get into this later, you're going to see the Tavaklis teaching your pre-Toltecs. This is why you're finding all these pyramids over in the United States. It don't have nothing to do with the post-Toltecs. This is antediluvian history, where sorcery and the dark art started to become proliferated throughout the island of Ruta, which is known as South America. Sorcery, witchcraft, it didn't start in Africa. It actually started in South America. And at the time, it was known as Ruta, during the Atlantean root epic, because of the brain power that was being used at this specific time, it caused mass destruction. The first destruction we see with volcanic eruption, roughly around 12 million BCE. Some say, and I'm not even going to get into the comet condor. I'll talk about that another time. So we see that there's a destruction, and then we get these floods. So now you have a grossness of sorcery taking place. So because of this, you see a flood take place. This is roughly around 800,000 BCE. You get the first flood. And then as time developed, you see this colonization or Grabansi, which later became known as Kemet. The reason why they called this area Grabansi is because originally Ethiopia was an island. We're going to get into that as we develop, because I'm going to show you slides. It was an island. And what happened, fertile soil was pushing down from this island to form Kemet or Grabansi. So you're seeing roughly around 400,000 BCE, this pyramid power being shifted over from Ruta or South America into what we call today Kemet. There were two colonizers. You had in Upper Kemet, a group from the Indus Valley came known as the Nagas. The Naga is a Sanskrit word that means serpent people. When you get the Hebrew word Nakash and Nagas, it's the same, meaning whisperer, enchanter, serpent power. When you see the Nasut or the pharaohs wearing the crowns with the cobras, which is indigenous to the Indus Valley, you see in that they're identifying themselves with the ancient Nagas of the Indus Valley. This is in Upper Kemet during pre-dynastic Kemet, before the people of Kemet existed. The people of Kemet or Mizraim are post-Diluvian that are descendants of Ham. They only became the custodians of what already existed during pre-dynastic Kemet, known as the divine dynasties. You had the first divine dynasty, the second divine dynasty, and the third divine dynasty. So now you get in this pyramid power from these pre-Toltecs, so Upper Kemet, or what became known as Upper Kemet, are the Nagas. Lower Kemet comes from the island of Ruta from South America, known as your Nokols. And this is where born Upper and Lower Grabansi or Kemet, which later through Menes or Narmer, he unified Upper and Kemet, which was a descendant of Ham. So now you have from there, if you look at 4 or 5 of this Atlantean, you see what? Original Shemite. Why? Remember I told you that the Hebrew existed even before Shem? Now, you have what are known as your pre-Shemites that came from a man by the name of Shemyaza that was born roughly around 850,000 BCE. When Noah, 9,564 BCE, named his son Shem, he named his son Shem after the pre-existent Shem that existed before him. So you see this pre-original Shemite in number 4 or 5 Atlantean breaking off and creating your Aryan root epic. Aryan is a Sanskrit Hebraic word that means noble. Right now we're in the Aryan root epic. It don't have nothing to do with race. Hitler and all them distorted that. So now what do you see? 1, Hindu, Egyptian. 2, Aryan Shemite. So now you're seeing this process of these root cycles and races coming into being. Go to the next slide because it's important. So now This is the history of Lemuria at its prime. Okay? And what do you see? You see in the reddish part landmass. The white part is the landmass underwater. So you can clearly see that Africa, parts of Africa was underwater. And as these floods are taking place, because the first flood was 800,000 BCE, the second flood was 200,000 BCE, the third flood was 80,000 BCE, and the fourth and the last flood, known as Noah's flood, was 9,564 BCE. As we develop with these maps that came from the book Legends of Atlantis and Lost Lemuria by minor archaeologists W. Scott Elliott, you're going to see Africa form as the maps develop. Next slide, my brother. Again, we see Lemuria roughly around 36 million BCE. And you clearly see that most of Africa was underwater, but there was land mass and we existed. Not in the sense of how we exist today. We looked at different. We were more stronger. We were more gigantic. Okay? We'll get into that as we develop. Next slide. So the History Channel even shows us ancient Lemuria known as Kumari Kandam. And what do we see connected to it? We see Madagascar connected. And we can easily prove it through the lemur monkeys. If we're talking flora and fauna, we see that you have lemur monkeys in the Indus Valley, but you also have lemur monkeys in Madagascar. How did lemur monkeys get to the Indus Valley? Simple, because there were land masses there, and we're going to prove it through the archaeological evidences as well, not just pictures. I'm painting a picture first, and as I develop, then I'm going to show y'all that the chronological records from the mighty Hebrew University, from the esoteric knowledge that was handed down to us, is aligning, or Hebrew Cosmogenesis and Hebrew Anthropogenesis is aligning with the historical record. Now, next slide. So here we go. Who is Hanuman? Part human, part monkey. Hanuman is a central character in the Hindu epic Ramayana. He is generally depicted as a man with a face of a monkey and a long tail, often described as the son of Hanuman, the Hindu god for wind. Hanuman is known for his extraordinary daring fleets, strength, and loyalty. And the source, you can go to Indian Probe's identity card for monkey god Hanuman in BBC News. Now, one might say, well, why are you bringing this up? Because I want to show you the hybridization of what is known as Ramapithecus, Australopithecus, the Cro-Magnon, the Neanderthalians, right? Because they do say that the Neanderthalians have RH rhesus monkey DNA in them. I want to show you the hybridization is being identified in the story of the Ramayana. And this is also going to give you the understanding the origin of the white race. Huh? Because aren't they the ones that come out most of the time with a cactus tail, which is known throughout the esoteric writings as the Karna buffer? We're going to show you the real origin of the so-called white race as we develop. Next slide. So there goes Art Station Hanuman, Hindu god. Now, my God, man, I mean, my Hebrew, you showing these images of the Hindu god Hanuman that was created by the god Rama. What is so important about this Rama and this Hanuman? Well, Hanuman is the Sanskrit word that born the English word human. Next slide, because now it's time to get into the paleontology of this demonstration. So now we have here at the Better India the Ramapithecus and the Shivapithecus. That's very interesting. Now, they found human-like bones in the Indian subcontinent in Tanzania known as Ramapithecus. But the funny thing about this demonstration is that they named these bones Ramapithecus from after the Hindu deity Rama. And in the story of the Ramayana, right, isn't it that Rama creates this half human, half beast man like species? And then it gives us a greater understanding of the movie Planet of the Apes, right? And that Rama created Hanuman, right? And now you have paleontologists and archaeologists that found these fossilized bones in the Indian subcontinent, also in Tanzania, known as Ramapithecus. Next slide. Very interesting, right? Why is it called Ramapithecus? Ramapithecus, a fossilized anthropod ape of the Miocene epoch. And when you understand the sin of the mindless that we're going to read about, that's written in the stanza in Zion records, the Miocene period is roughly around between 16 to 18 million BCE. Ramapithecus, a fossilized anthropod ape of the Miocene epoch, known from the remains found in Southwest Asia, just as I said, the Indian subcontinent, and East Africa, just like I said, Tanzania, and probably ancestor to the orangutan. It is named from Rama, that Hindu deity, plus Greek Pithecus, ape. And you can find that at www.encyclopedia.com for Ramapithecus. So now in the next slide, we are at Legends of Atlantis and Lost Sumeria by W. Scott Elliott. And we're going to read about what is known as the sin of the mindless. And the sin of the mindless is the shameful acts of the mindless men at the first separation of the sexes. Remember how Adam in original form was neither male nor female, but a vorous being, a vorous asexual being that was neither male nor female, but a being that had masculine and feminine principle, which later separated into male and female sexes. So for the Afrocentric scholars, women were not on the planet before men. Men were not on the planet before women. Men and women came on the earth at the same time. The Hebrew word for rib is zalah. Zalah is the feminine principle that resides in Ha'adam, not a literal rib. So again, the shameless acts of the mindless men at the separation of the sexes have best be referred to in the words of the stanza of the archaic book of Zion. No commentary is needed. During the third root race, the boneless animals. Next slide. The boneless animals, because remember, when I showed y'all that diagram of the root so-called races and how 3, 4 or Lumeria was blank, and I said we weren't fully coursed, notice how I'm aligning with everything I'm saying. I'm aligning exactly to what I'm saying. So watch this, y'all, because this goes deep. So let's read. During the third root race, the boneless animals grew and changed. They became animals with bones. Their bodies became solid. The animals separated first. They began to breed. The twofold man, talking about Ha'adam, separated also. He said, let us, as they, let us unite and make creatures. And they did. And those that had no spot took huge she animals into them. Now, we know scientifically you have what is known as ghost gene DNA. And you also have R.H. Reese's monkey DNA gene. And when you study the sciences, they never found this amongst us, the R.H. Reese's monkey DNA. But you find this in Asians, Europeans, and many Native American tribes. And you find this in the Neanderthalian bones. This is why, and this is just facts. Watch. Now listen. Now listen. They begat upon them dumb races. Dumb they were themselves, but their tongues untied. The tongues of their progeny remained still. Monsters bred. A race of crooked, red-headed cover monsters, or the orangutan, going on all fours. And if you notice in the movie The Planet of the Apes, the orangutan was very intellectual, because what is happening is a devolution, not an evolution. See, in Darwin's theory, he wants you to believe that man evolved from a primate or ape-like species. At the Mighty Hebrew University, we're saying the opposite. The primate and the ape-like species evolved from man. Two different things. Or better yet, devoluted from man. When you go into the ancient records of nations from the Indus Valley, they taught that apes and monkeys came from wicked men that mixed with species that weren't of their family line. And that's very interesting, right? To understand. So what we're saying is that man was on the planet before the bones that they actually find, such as the Australopithecus, the Ramapithecus, the Homo erectus. We existed. These are hybrids from our human family mixing with other species. So this is why the Mighty Hebrew University, we don't teach a monogenesis. We teach a polygenesis. So there are nations on the planet that don't even descend from Noah. How about that? How about that? See, let's get it going. Let's get it cracking. Third, it says, a dumb race to keep the shame untold, right? And it breaks it down. And the ancient commentary adds, when the third separated and fell into sin by breeding men animals, these animals became ferocious and men, and they mutually destructive. To then there was no sin. Go to the next slide. And you're going to see a diagram, because I'm keep going, keep going, keep going, right there. So you see this diagram right here, and you see the primordial and astral man. So the first is the Keter, that's the mind, and you see two separate entities taking place. So when they talk about the missing link is the mind, and the mind trickled down into the best part, which is us on the right hand side. And the beast man species, like the apes, the monkeys, gorillas, all that, just even the so-called white race, you know what I'm saying? You can see the origins are from the left. That's why the Euro-Gentile use the left side of the hemisphere of the brain, whereas though we use the right side of the hemisphere of the brain function, right? And I had you skip over some of that stuff because for time's sake, I want some of the people to see some of the information. So go to the next slide. Because one might say, well, where's your scientific evidence? You can go Hilltop to the next slide. So you keep past that right now. You're going to pass that because that comes from out of my book, Our True History, the Diaspora and Our Freedom. Right there, right there, right there. Stop. Yep. Keep it right there. Yep, right there. Where you see, yep. So now we at the Smithsonian Institute.com. And what does it say? Doesn't it say? Let's see what it says. Doesn't it say modern humans once mated with other species? I didn't say it. This comes from the Smithsonian Institute. It says genetic studies reveal some modern humans carry DNA from extinct hominoid species, evidence of ancient interbreeding. Humanity has a filthy secret. Our ancestors used to have sex with members of other species, right? That's the finding in a new piece of research, which suggests ancient people used to rump with a ghost species, a proto-human. Watch. It's going to get deeper, y'all. It's going to get deeper, right? It says, we are just one of a number of species known as hominins. Members of this family include Neanderthals and Denisovans, which are no longer found on Earth. It seems that interbreeding between different early hominin species is not the exception. It is the norm, says Umar Gukaman, assistant professor of biological sciences at the University of Buffalo. Gukaman tested the DNA of humans living in sub-Saharan Africa and found genes which were widely different from versions found in other modern humans. You want to know why? Because there were other species that didn't come from our line. That's why you finding all them different bones, because these were two different species, our species mixing with a species that didn't belong to our line. Let's even go deep. Go into the next slide. Go to the next slide. We're about to get it. Let's get it. So let me go. Hold on. Yep, right there, right there. So we in Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Creamer, who challenged the academia norm when it comes to dating humanity, right? So we have here him saying Ramapithecus first came to the attention of scientists in the 1930s. This creature initially, because you got to hear this creature initially regarded as a fossil ape was named after Rama, an incarnation of God described in the Vedas. Did I not tell y'all that? Did I not tell y'all that they got this story, or they named this hybrid primate slash human ape bones after Rama, the Hindu god that supposedly created Hanuman, the ape god man? Did I not, Hilltop, show that? Did I not thus far align the archaic records with the scientific data, right? Nobody else is doing this but me. The archaic records with the scientific data, let's continue on, was named after Rama, an incarnation of God described in the Vedas. In 1964, Ramapithecus achieved worldwide fame when Edwin Simmons and David Pilbeam reconstructed the upper jaw from the two fragments, giving it a characteristically human parabolic shape. Simmons and Pilbeam pronounced Ramapithecus to be a hominin, an erect bipedal primate. In 1964, Edwin Simmons wrote in Anthropology, Ramapithecus punjabius is almost certainly man's forerunner of 15 million years ago. Come on, man. I ain't say that's the scientists. That's what they say. I'm just giving y'all the information, right? Watch. This determination increases tenfold the approximate time period during which human origins can now be traced with some confidence. This was a bit of an overstatement because between Australopithecus and Ramapithecus, there was and still is a gap of several million years in the hominin fossils records. In any case, Ramapithecus quickly received acclaim in textbooks and journal articles as the earliest human ancestor. As Richard Linke and Roger Lewin wrote in 1977, Ramapithecus, as far as one can say at the moment, is the first representative of the human family, the hominids, 1984. So that ain't what I said. That's what they said. Looks like the data, the paleontological, archaeological data is lining up with what I'm saying. Go to the next slide. Now I'm at the book, Human Evolution, a Vedic alternative or alternative to Darwin's theory. That's the next slide. And what do I say? Well, not what I say, what the book actually said. Huh? What the book actually says. It says, my first book, Forbidden Archaeology, co-authored with the late, because he passed away, Richard L. Thompson, documents archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, consistent with the Puranas, the historical writings of ancient India. This evidence places a human presence so far back in time, as to call into question the Darwinian account of human origins. I'm stinging them. I'm killing them. I'm showing where through hibernization, us mixing. Go to the next slide, because what we got here, bone mystery. The ancient humans have sex with other species, the Neanderthalians. I'm giving y'all the facts. I ain't making it up. You can go, you can look this stuff up. And it says that the knowledge, and it says, let me blow it up. The knowledge of our human origins has taken a huge leap forward after anthropologists decoded the DNA of a bone as old as 400,000 years ago. And don't that 400,000 years ago align with the date that we see when these white adaptation lodges in Gurbati, known as Kemet, started, which became known as the first divine dynasty? Ooh. Go to the next slide. We got the book here, Unveiling Genesis, right? Mystery of the Root, Races, and Cycles by Philip Lindsay. And you can pass from his book. I just wanted to show you, and you're going to see two women. So slide. And in that book, he breaks it down when I'm saying that apes, gorillas, all of them are a devolution of man. That's what he said out of his own mouth. I didn't say it, he said it. So go to the next slide, go down. You're going to see two women. Keep going, keep going. Because I'm going to skip over that, because when I come back to my second part, then I'm going to go to the certain things I'm in right there. And what you see right there. India and Bangladesh are the known places where you can see to this day hybrids. And you see it right here. Do you not? This ain't something I'm making up. You see it. And we have, go to the next slide. You're going to see Prince Dr. Shalia. Two black men, keep going. And he says history must backtrack in giant steps to come to the spiritual reconciliation or acknowledgement of truth, which is salvation. That late Prince Dr. Shalia Ben Yahuda, and that's true. We have to define history. Go to the next slide. We see Atlantis at its prime. This is roughly 1 million years ago. Now, one might say, man, you can't prove that by the Hebrew. Remember that date, 1 million years ago. And don't it say it up there? Y'all can see it. It says the world about 1 million years ago, during many previous ages, and up to the floods of about 800,000 years ago, Atlantis at its prime. Remember, 1 million years ago. I need y'all to remember that. Next slide. I need y'all to remember that. and what you see right there. You see the Ramorhos, do you not? Atlantide and all that. You see the Ramorhos being mentioned right there on top. Go to the next slide. Right, there go Atlantis again at its prime. Huh? 1 million years ago. And don't y'all see Africa forming more and more? Now, here we go to the meat, y'all. Next slide. So you see that first flood, 800,000 BCE. Don't you see Africa forming even more? Now you're starting to see it more and more. Huh? Right? Next slide. Then you see that third map, 200,000 BCE. You see Atlantis split into two, Ruta and Datia. Next slide. You see Datia is destroyed. It's known as Post-Adonis, 80,000 BCE to 9,564 BCE, which left Ruta. Okay? Next slide. So here we go. Remember I told y'all to remember 1 million years ago. Did I not? Did I not, Hilltop, say, remember 1 million years ago? So here go tools of Tamanadu, right? 1 million years ago. Early Pessinine presence of hominids in South India. Come on, man. This is 1 million BCE. This is science today. And on the side of it, it gives you my primary source. Remember, I showed y'all the map of Atlantis or Tamanadu at its prime 1 million BCE. And now I'm giving you the archaeological evidence proving that hominins did exist 1 million years ago. This is light work. Go to the next slide. This is light work. So we talking about Tamanadu going roughly between 385,000 BCE to 172,000 BCE. And we had the Ataram Mekong. And they found the tools in these areas in the Indus Valley going back 385,000, 350,000 years ago. Huh? Let's go to the next slide. See what I'm doing? I'm showing the archaic records. So, and for y'all that think, Egypt is old, well, scientists from the IIT, Karam Park, and Archaeological Survey in India have uncovered evidence that the Indus Valley civilization is at least 800,000 years, 8,000 years old, and not 5,500 years old, taking root well before the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilization. That's what they said. That's what the new data is saying. That's in the Indus Valley civilization is older than what we were taught. Your story. Go to the next slide. See, it was this man right here that you see, Max Mueller. He's the one that created the Aryan invasion myth in 1856. He came up with that. Max Mueller is the propagator of the Aryan invasion theory. And he wrote to his wife that it took only 200 years for them to crystallize or Christianize the whole of Africa. But even after 400 years, India eludes us. I have come to realize that it is Sanskrit which has enabled India to do so. And to break it after I have decided to learn Sanskrit. The soul of India lies in Sanskrit. See, they knew. Go to the next slide. See, these conquerors understood, they knew. And Max Mueller was a paid employee who translated the Rig Veda in a demeaning style. And you can get that in the Histories of His Life, Volume 1. So now let's get into the facts. Next slide. I'm telling you that the Aryan invasion theory is a total misconception. And we can go into the Yogi Gurunath, Sabhamnath. He breaks this down in Babaji, the lightning standing still. So let's go into The source, see, we got to go into the sources of Eastern scholars. We can't just go by what the West say. And what he said, he says that the Aryan invasion is a misconception and a concocted story to divide India and strip of its own knowledge and culture, giving the credit to India's wisdom to foreigners. Mm-hmm. Where are the burnt fortresses, the weapons and relics of mingled armor? Where are the smashed chariots and bodies and invaders and defenders? Despite extensive excavation at the Haraparian sites, there is not a single bit of evidence that can give us unconditional proof of any ancient foreign invasion. Any skeleton or artifact proofs that were and are being found are of totally indigenous Aryan Dravidian origin. It should be noted that no hard evidence has proven the Aryan invasion theory to be a fact. The recent emergence of new evidence over the last couple of decades has debunked the validity of the Aryan invasion theory. The origin of this theory is nowhere to be found in Indian historical records of the Vedas, Puranas, and the Itsaurus, but it is only mentioned in the 19th and 20th century politics and German nationalist propaganda. Next slide, come on. I'm putting these guys in the coffin. That's exactly what I'm doing. Look, next slide. In the year 1853, Max Muller was commissioned by the British to write about the Aryan invasion in order to promote their divide and rule policy. He created a rift by creating his Aryan race theory as opposed to the Dravidian race. When challenged in the year 1888 by eminent scholars, he saw his reputation was at stake and backpedaled from the word race, explaining that it meant to include only those who speak the Aryan language. The original Sanskrit meaning of the word Aryan is the noble one who is righteous, and it was commonly used in addressing a gentleman as Aryan Putra. It has nothing to do with race, caste, or color. It simply connotes a noble inhabitant of Aryan Vatra, the land of India. So admitted that his theory of the Aryan invasion was concocted and there was no Aryan invasion and subjugation of Dravidian people. So he admitted to that. Max Muller admitted that he made it up. Next slide. He made it up. So we have here In Search of the Cradle of Civilization, written by George Ferguson and Shabazz Khan and David Farley. So I wrote, you go to the next slide. I wrote, an essay on this book, and this is what I said in my essay. Contrary to the school book notion, the real cradle of civilization was not Kemet, also known as Egypt, Hawash, Kush, also known as Ethiopia, nor Sumer, but the greater Indus Valley. The book above is a must-read Israel, which completely revisits ancient history and cite the latest archaeological, geological, and linguistic evidence showing that the original Edenian Shemitic Indus Valley had a high evolved Tamar Nadu, or Numerian and Atala Atlantean Hebrew or Hebraic culture that has influenced the world decisively and still has much to teach us today. Right? I say this book goes into an ancient Edenian Shemitic text called the Rig Veda. And now scholars are saying that this text is much older than assumed, and that this book, In Search of the Cradle of Civilization, decodes the profound spiritual wisdom hidden in its symbols, metaphors, and myths. myths. The three authors of this book also unravel the astonishing mathematical and astronomical code hidden in the Edenian, Lemurian, Atlantean, Hebraic, Indus Valley Vedic hymns. So what we're seeing is a group of neo scholars that's challenging the social norm. And as you read my thesis, I'll break down so much stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop there and take on any questions and answers where anybody heard. And also, I'm going to stop and come back with part two. And I know exactly where I'm at. I'm at in search of the cradle of civilization. So if there's any questions and answers, or what I just brought forth through this demonstration so far, or any questions and answers from the panel or those in the audience, please feel free. Hallelujah.
Great presentation, man. Great breakdown. I'm learning a whole lot. Yeah, you had a couple questions in here. I didn't get a chance to start all of them. Hey, all the questions that y'all have, y'all might have posted before. Please repost them right now. Let me get to one of my seen earlier. It came from 1968. He want to know question. What comes before the beginning? The beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Book of Genesis written by Moses again. What comes before the beginning? 1968. I mean, I don't know if you could understand that question.
I don't know
Um,
1968, but I understand what you say. What comes before in the beginning? In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Book of Genesis written by Moses. What comes before in the beginning? Well, it doesn't say in the Hebrew in the beginning. That has to better sheet don't mean that. It's in beginnings, had, or the first in rank. So when you talking about it's in beginning or in a beginning, it should be properly translated in beginnings. In begins because we talking about continuous cycles and seasons. See, if it was the beginning, there would be a definite article. And the definite article in the Ivri is headed. But the definite article itself is not there. Okay. So we want to make that crystal clear. As y'all can see, it's daytime over here now. It's daytime. So
yeah,
yes,
man, we on three different times.
it's 7:16 a.m. in the morning. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying this stuff. So like I said, there's no such thing as the beginning. It's just continuous cycles and seasons. So there were infinite beginnings. So it's just a continuous cycle and season, cycle and season. But I'm trying to understand the 1968. That's what I'm
I
trying
mean,
to figure.
that's they name of their channel. So I guess they put their signature on the end of it. That's the name of their channel,
Oh,
1968. All right. So
okay, okay.
another question came from Nate Stone. He wants to know, can a non-Israelite be saved if they keep the covenant commandments? So they keep the commandments of Moses, the Torah, because they are Gentile. He said, I am a Gentile, and they want to be saved. What kind of salvation? Can they get saved? Can a non-Israelite, can a Gentile get saved? Or can a non, because some people believe Gentiles are different from a regular foreigner or a regular heathen or a regular, outside the nation of Israel. But he wants to know, can a non-Israelite be saved? And if they can be saved, what kind of salvation will they get?
Well, I don't want to sound religious, so I'm putting it in no political sense. Yes, he can become what is known as a citizen in the nation of Israel by the way of naturalization. When we are first self-governed as Israelites and establish ourselves as a nation, true indeed. But right now, no, we don't have the authority of naturalization until we fully become sovereign. It's just like if, let's say, if you Taiwanese and you want to be a U.S. citizen, there's channels you got to go through to be a U.S. citizen. You can't just cling to Americans and say, I'm an American. No, there's a process to become an American. You may not be native born American, but you become a citizen through naturalization. It's the same with the nation of Israel. You may not be of the natural branches of Israel, but you become a a citizen by the way of naturalization, and that by the way of agreeing to upholding the law, statutes, and commandments of the Creator. Hallelujah.
Okay. Next question will be who is Lucifer, Satan, the proclaimer, the devil? Yeah. I guess I want to ask, is Lucifer, because we had a show one time, is Lucifer, Satan, and the devil the same person or different deities?
A Hilltop. Hold on, before you answer that, Prince. Some of those questions are being posed to other chat members. They were having a separate conversation, so you got
Oh,
to
okay,
be careful with some of those questions.
okay. But but you can
I
answer that if
answer,
you want to.
I answer that. They're different. They're different. Now, when you look at Lucifer, right, there's no devil in the ground, the devil, Lucifer. They distorted the book. Is it in the book of O Lucifer, son of the morning, right? In the book, I think the 14th chapter
Isaiah,
of Isaiah,
14 chapter.
right?
14 chapter Isaiah.
And the Hebrew word is halal, and it's a metaphor about the rise and fall of the Babylonian king. It don't have nothing to do with how we're conveying it to be from a religious sense. That's talking about the king of Babylon. Satan in Hebrew as Hashatan, which only means an adversary. So say if me and Hilltop, we box in a boxing ring, he becomes Hashatan to me because he's my adversary. This is not, if things have to be put in proper context within proper content. So in the Hebrew culture, Shaitan is just an adversary. Now, do I believe it's like this mythological demon in the sky and got kicked out of heaven? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because if you're looking for God and the devil, so to say, then what each individual need to do is wash their face and go look in the mirror. Because these attributes are defined within you. You are God. You are the devil. And I don't mean the most high Yahweh, but I'm talking about the characteristics of these said personalities. Okay. Doesn't the scripture say, Father, say, ye are Elohim, and you are the children of the most high Yahweh? So we're
Mm-hmm.
Elohim, or embodied in human form. That's who we are. Okay. So yeah, they are different, but you're not going to die and go to hell, to a burning lake of fire. That's all religious. When you look at the Hebrew word Sheol, it only means grave. We took that through Hellenism and started to add on to what was being conveyed by our ancestors. Remember, the Hebrews are an Eastern people. So we can't have these Western Christian concepts and trying to align them with Israelite thought. Most people that think like that, to me, are Israelites, but wrapped in Christian religiosity. They're
Right.
defining that Israelite, but when you really deal with the Israelite culture, that's foreign to the Israelite culture
Con.
anymore.
Yeah, the guy, let me see what he said. He says something
Hallelujah.
about,
Shakaniah got a question.
okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Where's it?
He
Hold
asked,
on.
does your book supersede the scripture? Is your book
Okay,
more
I ain't know.
factual than the scriptures?
Um, I'm trying to figure out what he's saying because we got to understand the Torah before it was even written in the script. It was oral. So our traditions was oral. And when you say the script, I'm going to say to you, yeah, when it pertains to the King James Version, but if you're talking about the real Sinaitic pictorial Hebrew, not at all. The modern texts that we have are not, they're totally mistranslated. When you go into your Strong's concordances are translating Hebrew words predicated on how the King James Version was translated, not based on the Hebrew itself. Let me give you an example. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. We under the impression that that's talking about JC, but it's clearly not if it's understood. It happened in the days of King Ahaz, son of Jotan, right? When he was rumbling Rezin, king of Aram or Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, who was a flunky of the northern kingdom of Israel, trying to destroy the southern kingdom of Israel, right? And this is roughly around 723 BCE when the Assyrians are coming in to conquer. So when you see in verse 14, it says the virgin shall conceive. It don't say that in the Hebrew text. It says for the young woman is with child. The Hebrew word that is being used is alma, which is young woman. For virgin is batulah. What the Strong's Concordance is doing will translate the word alma as young woman and also virgin. But if you go to any Hebrew speaker in the land of Israel, because I live in two locations, I live in Dimona, Israel, and I live in Tanzania, East Africa. So when you go over to Israel, Sephardic Hebrew is being spoken as the official language over there in the state of Israel. And if you identify the word Alma as virgin, nobody will know what you're talking about if you're trying to imply that as virgin. They will know that you're saying a young woman, but not a virgin, because we have a whole separate Hebrew word for virgin. So you see how Strong's have mistranslated Hebrew words predicated based on the mistranslations that are outlined in the King James Version. So one has to have an understanding of Hebrew thought before they can even define what is actually written in the scripture. Because on surface level, you'll think that it's literally 7 days. You'll think that it's just literally one man named Adam and one woman named Eve. You will literally believe that. And you will literally believe that there's a talking snake that Eve learned to eat a literal fruit. You would take all these things literal if you don't have the Hebrew cosmological and anthropological understanding of Hebraic concrete thought. You need master teachers. And this generation have severed themselves from their leaders and their teachers. Why? Because under the counterintelligence program, it told you that this would be long range effects and to demonize your leaders. When I was coming up in the Hebrew culture, I sat under Hebrew masters, under Hebrew master teachers. To be a true master, you have to sit under another master. You have to sit under another master. You can to be a samurai, or what do they say? Or what did Shogazuki say in the movie Pray for Death? And he said, only a ninja can stop a ninja, right? To be a master teacher, you have to study under a master. You cannot be on social media just watching videos only and scrolling and then tell us that God gave you a vision. No, there has to be order. There has to be a chain of cause and effect. When you go to the Shaolin Temple, you have the monk and you have the act. To be a samurai, you have to study by a samurai. You can't go to one of them, corner Shaolin schools and think you really getting the fullness without getting the walk. So you have to come under master teachers. Because remember earlier I said Hilltop, remember I was using mathematics to understand the Torah and the Tanakh. And I said when you first learn how to count, you learn from 0 to 9 or 1 to 10, and you start building mathematically. And what happens when these questions come about, because they weren't there in the beginning, meaning first learning how to count in this certain thought, and then going to the university to sit amongst master teachers to elevate your understanding of Hebrew cosmogenesis and Hebrew anthropogenesis, archaic Hebrew symbolism, Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism. They weren't there in these studies. So when they come with questions, the questions are preconceived based on what we've been taught by the way of religious learning.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
no, I was gonna because you was touching on the point, and I was just looking at some of the other comments, like slash questions. So one of the hangups, as I believe some of them are listening, is this idea about the lake of fire. Can you expound upon the Hebraic idea of the lake of fire, or was that a Hellenistic hijack of Hebraic thought? Can you expound on that?
Yeah, that whole concept of a lake of fire, that's pure Hellenistic. That has nothing to do with us. And that go all back into what you call Hades and hell. And you notice the root word for Hellenism is hell, right? It's hell. And what's crazy about this whole argument is that you see the curses outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 15 to 68, along with the book of Leviticus, the 26th chapter. And what they want us to believe is that the Most High Yahweh works in the state of double jeopardy. They want us to believe that curses were put upon us. And then after the curses, we're going to die and go to hell too. So not only did we get all these curses in hell and damnation on earth, they want us to believe that we're going to die and go somewhere and burn eternally. Isn't that double jeopardy in the court of
Right.
law? Is this a just power? But what we do see is that we've been catching nothing but hell amongst the nations of the earth, that we've been in captivity and receiving hell from a devil in a blue dress. And I love the late most honorable Elijah Muhammad, because he put pants on them devils for us to recognize who the enemy is in the midst of our people. And what I'm saying is, brothers and sisters, captivity is hell. Captivity is hell. Freedom is heaven. The heavens and the earth. The heavens is Shamayim, which is the mind. The earth is Igritz, which is the manifestation of substance from the mind. Everything started in the mind is going to end in the mind. Period. So you better get your heaven. See, they want you to believe that you catch this hell on earth, and then when you die, you get the pearly white gate. Why? The nations of the earth build a pearly white gate on earth. We're the only ones, because we wanted to leave from this place. because we was catching all this hell and damnation during slavery time. So we envisioned ourselves going somewhere away from the terrible confinement of massa, right? So we came with this conundrum of distorted ideas that have nothing to do with our redemption. Remember, we are in captivity because of what? We violated Torah. How do we come out of captivity? We return back to Torah. Hallelujah.
Right. And that's a great point, because even when you read in the scriptures in Isaiah chapter 5, verses 13 through 16, it tells you that captivity is hell. It gives you the whole outline and the context clues and the context as to what hell is. So when you read that in the Old Testament, then you get a better understanding of what hell is. Let me see if there's any more questions for you at this time.
Indeed.
Oh, somebody asked a
Okay.
question. I mean, no, they got a lot of New Testament questions there, man. That the man already addressed. You know what I'm saying, on the Messiah stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. It can be anything. I'm very versed in every book they can think of. Every
Yeah,
book.
some of the stuff you
Well,
already answered, like the.
here go a question
Go
from
ahead.
Professor Lovely Lady. If there is no hell, are there any consequences or judgment for how we have lived our life and treated other beings?
Absolutely. That's where the curses come in at. Absolutely. We are in captivity because of how we treated one to another. If we turn from our evil ways, remember the book of Micah, chapter 6, and Ezekiel chapter 18. All we got to do is just turn away from our evil ways, and that's that. And the judgment don't sit no more. We are in judgment because of ourselves. We are in judgment because the way we treat one to another. We are in judgment because we are violating one to another. And in that's how we break the laws of the Most High. So you're not going to die and be judged. You are being judged right now. The loss of identity, the loss of language, the black on black crime, the mass getting shot in the back by the pigs, right? The mass incarceration, the massive alphabet kids on the rise within our community, the broken homes, the fatherless children. All this is judgment, and much, much more that I'm not even mentioning. But for the brevity and sake of time, right, that this is judgment. And the only way to come from out of judgment, we got to change our ways. It's really simple. But I see something else up there. Oh yeah, that was saying, yeah. So yeah, you're not gonna die and go to heaven and hell. Heaven and hell has always been the lofty minds of the children of Israel.
So when they
And
say, so when that scripture say, "And all of Israel shall be saved," that just means that we're, in the next kingdom, we're all going to be pretty much ruling. Is that what you're
well,
saying?
the next kingdom is nothing but reincarnation. Because when you
Okay.
see that, when you see it in the book of Jeremiah chapter 18, and what do we see? We see the parable of the potter's field, the potter in the potter's field, and how the potter was molding the clay, in this pot, and then the clay became marred, right? And then he used the same clay to reshape it correctly. And then Yahweh tell Yirmiyahu, just as the potter, I can do this to the nation of Israel. We've always existed, but in different forms or different bodies. Even if one wants to jump in the New Testament, for the New Testament believer, they ran up to John saying, "Are you the Messiah? Are you that prophet?" Said that the Yeshua too. Are you Elijah? Why would they ask him if he was Elijah? You didn't see Yeshua nor Yochanan, known as John the Baptist, rebuke that because we acknowledge reincarnation. We acknowledge that. So yeah, in the next kingdom, okay, cool. But the kingdom is the process of the kingdom is already being established. That's why we're in the land now as the forerunners of this established kingdom. Remember, we destroyed our kingdom with our hands and feet and our desire to be like the other nations. It's going to be our hands and feet and our desire to return to Yah that's going to build our kingdom.
Man, listen, man. Nate Stone, the Gentile, but he been beating the comments up. It's Acts 35, Acts 10:35. You want to know that then Peter opened his mouth and said, "Oh, of truth I perceive that the Most High God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him." He want to come to the barbecue, man. We try. Nate
Oh,
Stone
man,
want to come to the barbecue, man, man. He trying to get up in there, Lord.
now for the understanding for some messianics, let me give you an understanding of this verse. I mean, that's cool for somebody that want to sing kumbaya to all nations. That's cool. But many of the One West community or all of them, they don't agree with that. That's what that means. What they agree with is when it says all nations, meaning that Israelites that will be scattered amongst all these nations on the name Gentile that's applying to. Me, I'm Torah only. I don't subscribe to the New Testament. So that doesn't even apply to me at all. So that wouldn't even be like, it wouldn't register to me because I'm Torah based. I don't subscribe to the New Testament. I only subscribe to the Tanakh. So having that understanding, the nations of the earth have to get judged. Let's make this clear. The nations of the earth is not going to get away with the things that they did to the children of Israel by using Israel as the umbrella to be saved. What I'm saying is, when a person says saved, it sounds religious to me. How they're saying it. First, it makes more practical sense if we see Israelites have their own sovereign land and government. When a person from another nation wants to sojourn amongst us, they will have to go through the naturalization process with our governmental structure. You see how I'm putting things in practical context? Verse, oh man, you could just convert. It sounds religious. Then anybody can you convert to being a US citizen, Hilltop? Can you convert to be an American? Or do you got to go through the proper channels and get a green card and go through all this stuff and being sworn in through naturalization to be an American, correct? But
Yeah. It's a process.
When it comes to our culture, and we know that the Torah is a constitution to control and to govern Israel, the body politic, then it becomes, oh man, we could just convert. No, you're not going to be able to convert into the kingdom. You will become naturalized and become a citizen through naturalization within the Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalistic governmental structure, also known as the kingdom of Yahweh. Hallelujah.
Okay. They got another question right here because he asked it earlier. He or she. They're like, I realize Yahweh is the son of our God is the Son of the Most High, who inherited us or even chose us. So Yahweh is our God. So Yahweh, our God, is an angel. The angel of the Lord is the Son who is Michael. So they asked earlier, is Yahweh or is the Most High or the Creator an angel? That's what they want to know.
No. Now let me break no. Now let me break something down to y'all because this is a very interesting question. When you understand Hebrew culture, the creator is expressed through dimensions known as Elohim. So if you're asking, is the Most High expressed through Elohim? Sure. But if the infinite subject, Yahweh, an angel, no. First of all, we got to first define what an angel is. That's what we first got to do. Now, in Hebrew culture, the word for so-called angel is Malek, which only means a messenger. Because Hilltop right now is a messenger to the people, because is he not bringing y'all a message right now on his podcast? The word angel is a Greco-Latin word that goes back to anglos, which means messenger. Well, in that retrospect, we're messengers of Yah. Nothing spooky, nothing mysterious. You know, I gotta get people back into the practical mind state that they gotta deal with things face off. Now, are there other forces within the ethers? Sure it is. I'm not in denial of that. Sure it is. But that's more spiritual, not religious, because there's a difference from spirituality versus religion. Because within the Hebrew Israelite heritage and culture, spirituality is capsulated within it. There is no separation. For 6 days you shall work. Work and worship is synonymous in Hebrew culture. The root word for worship or work is aveb, which means to toll for, the slave for. So what you eat is worshiping the creator. What you talking about is worshiping the creator. The way you sleep, the way you deal with life on a daily basis. We've been taught in the religious sense that the Sabbath or the Shabbat day is a day of worship. No, it's not. The Shabbat is a day of ceasing. The Hebrew word is lishbot, which means to halt from the continuous action of sheshamin ta'avod. See how religion tricked us into believing when you go into a building, you're worshiping, versus when you go into a building, you're paying reverence. Worshiping is your 24-hour, 7-day a week continuous action, living as a Hebrew Israelite Sabbath national. So I'm here to tell you, you're not going to die and go to hell. There's not a devil with a pitchfork, laugh at, ha, ha, red, trying to poke you up, you know, with this fork, and grill, you know what I mean, to put some barbecue sauce on you, you know what I mean, and that the confines of hell. You've been catching all this hell on earth. And you know what? That's also symbolic to post-traumatic slave syndrome, because we don't want to identify where the real hell is at and who the devil really is. Hell is the United States, and the devil is the white man that been giving it to you. And he's going to keep giving it to you until you realize who your true enemy is. Your first enemy is self, and then your outward enemy is that hybrid, that you're a Gentile. And I know y'all don't want to admit it, but come on, this is the same man that took your ancestors, the women, and tied them up upside down and cut the babies from out the stomach and stomped the baby to the ground. This is the same man that illegalized an abortion of a child that's born, and they put something inside the child's brain and kill. Come on, y'all. Y'all don't recognize that y'all in hell right now? Where you think you at? What you thought? You thought you was gonna die? Remember, you already died. You didn't know you died. When you lost consciousness of self as an Israelite, you became the walking dead. You thought you was alive. In the resurrection, it is 3 parts that Ben Ami established, known as Takia. 1, a dreadful awakening, being made aware of the state of the world in decay. 2, Now you're being brave. You're establishing yourself from unseen to seen. And 3, a quickening of the Yali mind. See, there was 3 stages of death and 3 stages of resurrection. You thought that you was, because you was breathing and walking and talking, you was alive. No, you have been walking amongst the dead for over 2,500 years. You ain't know that? You thought that because you can go eat a Big Mac or eat a bowl of Wheaties, you were alive. Remember how Adam was walking and talking, but he didn't have the Yah sense. He was dealing with instinctive will into the breath, consciousness of Yah was blown into him. Figuratively, through growth and development. So you got people walking and talking right next to you, Don Yahuda, right on the bus, dead in the doorknob. And the people don't know who they are, they're dead. Period. They're not a part of the land of the living. That's why when Malcolm X went to the UN, talking about 20 million Negroes was suffering at the hands of the enemy. And in 1993, when Farrakhan went to the UN, asking for reparations and, justice for African Americans, the UN never heard of them because they're defined under the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment as property. And when you define them property, you're talking about mind, soul, and body, 3/5 of a man, but they don't have no constitution, nor a nationality, which will cause them to be a 5/5 component, a 5/5 man. So when they took your nationality and your constitution away, you became a dead man walking, thinking you alive. A dead man walking, deaf, dumb, and blind. A dead man walking, thinking that you shining, but reality, a dead man that's dying or has died. So that's the answer to that.
Okay, and the last question from the chat right here gonna be from the good brother Cosmic Chaos TV from over there from the Waspy family, the Waspy Bible gang. He wants to know, so is hell spiritual or is it physical? Because if the curse only works physically, that would show a lack of confidence in the God if the curse or hell only exists in the physical world.
That's a good question from Cosmic Cow. Shout out to my man Sila Shalom. I know him personally. You know what I mean? I know him, my man Malachi Maccabee personally from out St. Louis. When we understand the curse, we understand the cause and effect of things. Everything in essence is spiritual. It's just vibrating on different frequencies. When you talk about material matter, it's just condensed slower because the vibration is slower. And when we really start talking technically spiritual, it's a Greek term, but for the listening audience, yes, there is a spiritual. The spirit is the mind that permeates the physical. Everything that we see outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 28 is based on a self-condition. You remember getting advice from your father and mother, boy, don't go around that corner. Boy, you make your bed, lay in it hard. Boy, what goes around comes around, because our ancestors knew by the way of experience. Remember when Whitney Houston said, I believe the children are the future? That's wrong. In Hebrew thought, the parents are the future of the children. See how they reversed everything? The point that I'm saying to the family is your physical conditioning is predicated on your spiritual reality. If you eat a certain way and you think a certain way, then a manifestation will take place. Like, for instance, you'll see people that are vegans, but they still be dying at young ages. Because for veganism to be in full effect, physically, spiritually, they have to align themselves with an ecological condition that's suitable for that dietary consciousness. Like, for instance, where we at right now in Dimona, Israel, you will see there's a culture behind the activity of veganism. Like, we don't just eat watermelon any time of the year. We only eat watermelon in accordance to the season it grows. We don't eat pineapple in accordance to the Western world when we just feel like it. We eat according to the season that these things grow in. So to say all these things is to say that we must align ourselves with a community that's embodying themselves in the instruction. One of the problems in the Israelite community is that they're trying to align themselves in the Torah based on how it was understood 3,500 years ago. No, you must abstract the principle and build Yah on earth through the mind. Again, you're not going to die and go to heaven and hell. In essence, you are Yah embodied in human form. But everybody is not on that playing field. Some people are on the playing field where they have to objectively look for anthropomorphical understandings to elevate their spiritual consciousness. Whereas though you may have people like myself that understand in essence we are God. And I'm only using that word loosely, God. But we are that which wills to exist. So again, you're not going to die. The ancient Hebrews didn't believe in these concepts of heaven and hell. When most people talk about the Hebrew Israelites, they talk about them based on the Western understanding. They never sat amongst Eastern scholars to see how we define the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew paradigm. Most Hebrews truly look at a lot of the scripture literally, and they run with that. They literally believe that the heavens and earth were created in 7 days, but it doesn't say that in the Hebrew. When one understands it from the Sinaitic pictorial Hebrew that it was originally written in. And each symbol is defining a story, which all derives back to Zenzar. So yeah, heaven and hell are definitely physical and spiritual conditions right here on this earth. But when it comes to I'm going to die and go to this judgment, you know, and sit amongst the clouds and determine to see if I'm going to even go to this mythological, and I don't even want to use the word mythological because it don't even mean what people saying, but this imaginary heaven and hell that don't exist in Hebrew culture. It never has. When we trace the origin of these things, we clearly see, like for instance, the word shamayim that they're translating as heavens in the Hebrew, it means that which is waters. That's what shamayim actually means. It don't mean like this lofty place in the clouds that you go to when you die. These are things that were picked up in our travels and migrations, learning from other nations. They believed in the concepts of heaven and hell. We didn't believe in them concepts. We only acknowledged heaven and hell was a lofty state of existence right here on earth. Hallelujah.
Okay. Danya Huda, man. You got any other? Danya, you got any comments or questions, Danya Huda? By your talk radio podcast?
No, not at this time. I mean, Prince Landine kind of touched on a lot of topics. Um, I'm just looking forward to part two. I did have some things that I wanted to throw out there that he could have expounded on today's presentation, but I'm gonna save that for when we follow up on the next one.
Absolutely. And definitely, and it was definitely an honor to be here. If anybody want to donate, you can at $ Uriah Victorious. Y'all know we got here the Ancient Bantu Hebrew Israelite Awareness Center. We got the farmhouse. Also, if anybody want to come visit our mission that we got going on in Tanzania, East Africa, please inbox me. I'll make sure that Don Yahuda and get the information on my Facebook page, or you can email me at mightyhebrew4, the number 4, at gmail.com. If anybody want to come visit, so they can see the work, and the work is a continuous process. And I've been here for 3 years thus far, and I got a lot of work done, and I'm very proud of the accomplishment and the progress within 3 years that'll take people probably 20 years to do. And I just want to give a shout out to the Tanzanian government, who has been a tremendous impact on helping Hebrew Israelites through, what I have established. Many immigration, when repatriators come, they send them to me so I can help them to understand, the Tanzanian land surface, the Swahili language. There's over 125 different tribes over here in Tanzania. So it's very imperative to link up with foundational Black Americans that are over here in alliance and fulfilling the prognostications that we would return back to the land from the great river Egypt to the Euphrates. I want to give a shout out to my mentors, the Kingdom of Yah that's stationed in Dimona, Israel, Northeastern Africa, to my mentors, the late Ben Ami, the late Prince Asiel, to all those that, was a part of my growth and development as a Hebrew Israelite Sovereign National, gave me the power force to develop Hebrew Cosmogenesis, Hebrew Anthropogenesis, archaic Hebrew symbolism, and the list goes on and on. And I also want to thank everybody that supported my first book, My True History of the Diaspora and Our Freedom. This spring, my newest book will be out, 311 trillion, 40 billion BCE to now. Also, my albums, y'all can pick them up anywhere. My first album, Mind Mental Was Never Destroyed, that came out in 2021. 2023, we have Journey to the Dark Side of the Moon. 2024, War Cloud. In 2025, I'm working on my album now, which is known as Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Shout out to Killer Priest. I'm working on a solo. We starting now to work on a solo project known as the Keta Mind. Mind is an acronym that means mental is never destroyed. So look out for that. That's strictly me and Killer Priest. So it's going to be fire. 2025 about to be fire. You know
It's
what I'm
going
saying?
live,
So
2025. It's going live. It's going live. Man, I appreciate you, brother. Mighty Hebrew man. I've been meaning to want to get you on here for a long time. And the brother's coming back for a part 2 of this. He also gonna be back. Y'all also check this out in 3 more weeks from now, 21 more days. I had to push this back because I wanted to get this brother presentation started before part 10 of controversial and deep conversations with Hebrew Israelites of different teachings and different doctrines. Part 10 of that is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have, actually 3 weeks from now, I'm going to have the WASPy representative, maybe Cosmic Cal, or brother, Darryl Cosman, or somebody, or Shalom Shalom, Malachi Maccabee, maybe somebody from, New Testament, Old Testament. You know what I'm saying? We get different teachings and stuff. And here's the topics that we're going to be discussing. What happens to our spirit when we die? What laws of the Most High / creators are we commanded to keep? Should we be planning an exorcist out of America? Will Christ, Yahushua, or another Messiah come and lead us back into rulership on earth again? And then bonus questions: are there other life forms outside of this planet and inside the earth / inner earth? And are we under the Old Testament or New Testament, the covenant? So those are going to be some questions. All of them are
definitely
fire.
like in the inner earth, which is also known as the hollow earth. So I'm not
Right.
like I'm highly familiar. I'm telling you, I'm highly familiar. Like Shout out to my brothers from the Owaspi. Like, I'm highly familiar with the Owaspi teachings. You know what I mean? I first read that book roughly around 27 years ago. You know what I'm saying? I got my own copy of the Owaspi. So I'm highly familiar with them teachings along with the Medunetta. I knew enough Ahmed Law personally that wrote the Medunetta. I know Ashby that wrote Egyptian Yoga, Sorry and Resurrection. I read all Dr. Malachi C. York books, all Sheikh Antidia books, Mubanga, Dr. Yosef A. Ben, Yokanai, Dr. Hamid Clark. So I'm highly familiar with many of these teachings and concepts and precepts. I've done studied heavily on Buddhism, Confucianism, Daoism, Zen, Islam, Judaism, Christian, you name it, Ifa. The list goes on and on. And the reason why I studied everything possible is because I understood that Israelites were scattered amongst all these nations. And remember, we will uphold the ways and customs of the nations that were around us. So it's very important to sit back and understand these things. And I think also it's because the teachers that we had, like, you could tell there's a difference from me versus many Israelites because look, my teacher was the late Prince Asiel. Like, it don't get no higher than that in the Israelite culture than Prince Asiel. So it's like being under him for so many years, for over 25 years, and being a direct understudy of him, it caused me to have like an advantage, you know, because one thing that we would learn in the school of the prophets, we had to study all things to get an understanding and not just study them from a standpoint for it to be an our advantage, but to understand it from the advantage of the practitioner. And what is the drawing principle of these schools of thought? What is the principle? And I think a lot of this become argumentative because most people are looking at things from a ritualistic perspective. And what happens, tribalism or set tripping starts to develop. You right, I'm wrong. But then but when you get into the principle, when you say, damn, in principle, I'm a Buddhist. In principle, I'm a Taoist. In principle, I'm a Muslim. That's why when Farrakhan made that statement years ago that he said, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew, I'm a Buddhist. People said he was crazy, not understanding he was speaking figuratively than principle. And this is people lack understanding, they run. Now, as a practitioner, yes, I'm an Israelite. I uphold the Israelite culture. But in principle, I can understand other people's cultures in principle. So I can sit with a Buddhist monk and build. I can sit with a Rastafari and understand I and I, Yah Rastafari. It's real easy to understand in principle. So it was definitely an honor and a privilege to be here amongst the gladiators in our community, you know, the Elohim on earth. And I can't wait to come back and do part two. And I ain't even get to the surface. I'm not even on the surface of my PowerPoint. You know what I mean? Because there was so many questions, which it was really like a hot seat. So I'm glad that got out the way first. And then now we can really get into the meat of the subject matter and show that the Hebrew culture is deeper than what people think. You know what I mean? And it's not just this blanket understanding that we see on social media. To the Rabbah, Adoni.
Okay, man. I appreciate it, man. And we definitely gonna get a thumbnail made up, man. We'll get the presentation, I mean the premiere out there, man, so we can get the anticipation will be sure enough ready, man, because we had a good turnout today. Probably one of the best turnouts we ever had on here. I think the only other turnout that came out to be probably this big was probably the first time Salah Salone came on with the Waspy. So you
Absolutely.
know, so that was yeah, no, so that was a big show here at Dig In.
I'll probably have Selah Shalom in this fourth album because me and him supposed to, you know, I had did a couple of tracks together, but I wound up moving over to Damona, Israel and Tanzania. Shout out to Sila Shalom. He's definitely a comrade, and he goes to the Soul Vegetarian restaurant deli out in Atlanta, Georgia. So he's definitely familiar with the Hebrew community that I come from out of. So Sila Shalom is a very close friend of mine that I've known, probably known Sila probably like 20 years. You know, it's been a very, very long time. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, everybody has the growth, development, and walk, and the application is definitely necessary. And we need brothers and sisters that's trying to, you know, come into righteousness. And like I say to everyone, the kingdom is here. Just look in the mirror. Hallelujah.
Okay, they go. Man, shout out to Sloss Alone. There you go, right there, man. Sloss Alone, always supporter of the Scoring Black Man podcast. We're definitely gonna have all y'all brothers on for part 10 of our controversial and deep conversation with Hebrew Israelites and different teachings and different doctrines. I'd like to give a shout out to the whole chat. You know, to my moderators, Professor, Sister Professor, lovely lady. You know what I'm saying? Everybody, I seen everybody in there. There's a whole bunch of people to name, the Wasp family. Man, shout out to the Gentiles, man. The Gentiles been tearing the chats up. Boy, they've been tearing the chats up, man. They dropping scriptures after scriptures after scriptures, man. They want in on the barbecue. They say, hell, we want in on the barbecue. We want to stand right beside you. Matter of fact, hey, serve us first, and then you niggas eat later. Man,
And,
shout out to the
and
Gentiles.
you see how I did that, right? You see how I did that. They got to get naturalized. This ain't no thing you convert. This is a nation. You can't just come into. That's like me going to Korea being like, yo, I'm Korean. They gonna look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah,
They gonna be like, oh,
right.
did you go through the proper channels and get naturalized? That's the same in the Hebrew Israelite culture and heritage. When we rule, we're gonna set up a sovereign Torah constitutional Senate government, which is in accordance within this dispensation of time by the way of abstracting and forming the principle, and from there, y'all can get naturalized. But we have to be in position of power, ultimate power, before we can do all that. So that's where I stand at on that. Hallelujah. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
definitely an
yeah. All the
honor.
Gentiles keep watching. Keep watching. Subscribe to the channel. Everybody
Yeah,
subscribe to the channel. The Jews and the Gentiles subscribe to the channel.
and much respect to, you know, what other nations do, they do. Because what people failing to understand, I want to make this one more thing I want to say. The mission of the Hebrews wasn't to cause people to convert to our ways. The ways of the Hebrews was to be a beacon of light to the nations of the earth, so they can sparkle light within the principle of each people's culture. In essence, Buddhism isn't evil in essence, in principle. So say if we Israelites, we upholding Torah, and the Buddhists won't see us in the Mona living a certain lifestyle, which in turn influences them to open up certain portals within their own cultural structure. And then what becomes universal, they acknowledge, but they still have their uniqueness because of geographical location and environmental conditioning. That's natural. So for the Hebrew, it wasn't meant that the whole world be under Torah. No, the world would be under Torah by the way of expressing righteousness, which is universal in base. So you might have a practitioner that say in Sufism, and they're in alignment with the element, but they're not necessarily speaking Hebrew or upholding Torah, but they are upholding universal principles that's aligning with the natural order of things. So that was the purpose of the Hebrew, to be a beacon of light within their own cultural expression. In turn, it would spark within their remembrance the principles of universal life for all nations. So you don't have to become Polish to express oneness and truth. You don't have to be Japanese and uphold their culture to get closer to thyself. But you can express through your own cultural expression. You see what I'm saying? And each nation has a right, as Noble Drew Ali said it best, each person has a right to be under their own fig and vine tree. As long as them customs are detestable and causing an off balance to the harmony. You understand? So what the Eskimo may do, you may not do in South Africa. But as long as the Eskimo is aligned with the environment that they're in and the person in South Africa. So I just want to make that clear. We as Hebrew Israelites, we're not here to convert anyone. We are here to express our culture righteously and to establish ourselves as a governmental structure of righteous beings or Elohim embodied in human form, and to be a beacon of light for other nations to see and live out their own culture by our example. Hallelujah. So truth don't come from us, it's coming through us. Hallelujah.
Gotcha. And with that, I like to thank everybody on the panel. Please hit the subscribe button here at the Storm Black Man Podcast. Hit the like button on this show. Hit the subscribe button over at Fire Talk Radio. You know what I'm saying, brother Daniel Huda. Make sure that you send a good donation over to the brother Mighty Hebrew right here at the cash out right here below. And how I like to end the show is always the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For the Most High God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. With that, peace, love, and have grace to y'all. Keep the faith, peace, and abundant blessings. Shalom.